Welcome to APEC Open Mic. It is December 9th. I'm your moderator, Tim Ventura. I want to give a big thank you to everybody for joining us on this call, along with everybody watching us on YouTube. This is Casual Saturday. We're, about 2 weeks out from Christmas, so this is going to be more casual than usual. As I just mentioned off camera a moment ago, so Drew Aurigema is going to be giving us an update on his work. We're anticipating Jack Sarfatti in a few minutes, and Curtis Horn said that he will come in later. Also, we want to have some open discussion. A few minutes ago, we were talking a little bit about Tesla and things like that. So, lots of exciting stuff here. Thank you guys for joining us. So as a reminder, today's session is for open discussion and ad hoc presentations. The folks I just mentioned, those are all ad hoc. They just said, hey, we've got something to present. It fits with what we're doing. We don't schedule these in advance, but we do have those attendees who reached out and asked. So I'm excited to get them started, but I want to give you guys some quick reminders first. You can view conference replays, details, and speaker info on our website at altpropulsion.com. Now, I have not been posting the open mic stuff on the main website. And again, part of that is because we don't really know what we're going to have until we have it. And so it makes it very difficult to put that up. That's all on the Alt Propulsion YouTube channel. I upload all of these. I try and do it within a day or so. I do try and edit and put in timestamps and things like that. But definitely visit us online at altpropulsion.com. The YouTube channel is going to have all of these. So I should mention also, during the ad hoc presentations, try and save your questions for after the presenter finishes, if possible. Again, these folks aren't scheduled, but it always helps if we don't interrupt. That way they don't lose their train of thought. I have been accused of that in the past myself. So you can raise your hand in Zoom, which we're on tonight, using Option Y on Mac or Alt Y on Windows. You can also type your questions into chat. We're not going to be firm on hand raising during open mic unless things get completely chaotic. It depends. Sometimes it's very quiet. Other times everybody has stuff to say. So, it kind of comes and goes. But let me encourage you to jump in if it feels appropriate. Let's try and keep things focused on the core topics of the Alt Propulsion community, though. So again, we do have some ad hoc presentations. I already mentioned those. I want to go right into Drew Aurigema. So I'm going to unspotlight myself and try and find Drew. And let me see, I will ask him to unmute. Okay. And Drew, all right, perfect. I'll spotlight you for everyone. You have an update for us, sir.
Hello. Yeah, this week I've been playing around with some new plate chemistry, and we got a new team member who's a battery genius, literally, and he's been bringing battery chemistry to bear on our awesomeness. And what I wanted to do is just show you. I spent this last week doing long duration testing. I stretched the time runs for the test up to 25,000 seconds, which is something around 8 hours. And as of, I don't know, I shut it down when got pizza. But as of tonight, the test article that's in the chamber right now has about 17 hours of runtime on it. So that was kind of cool. And what I'd like to do is just show one of the graphs from whenever this was, December 8th. So I guess yesterday. I usually get 2 of these tests a day, and because it takes 12 hours, or I get 1 test a day because it takes about 12 hours to zero out the plates, so that I start with a fresh plate with no thrust in it. So it's been a lot of fun. I really never thought that I would be able to get these plates to stay fully operational and fully functional for 2 minutes at a time, let alone 8-hour stretches. And pretty much the only reason I shut them down is because I usually get hungry or sleepy or bored. So let me see if I can't. Man, a whole nother set of instructions. Give me a second. Screen share. Screen one. So hopefully y'all are seeing something.
Yeah, it's showing raw force and voltage for December 8th.
Yeah, right. Let me close out this Python overlay. Just give me a sec. I haven't saved this yet. This is December. This is December. This was, what was this? This was probably test 3. Yeah. That's something I don't know if anybody else thinks about, but you run enough tests and you're just inundated with data. I spend, 8 hours a week, maybe 12 hours a week, just processing raw data into something that you can actually see and understand. For example, this was the raw force and voltage for December 8th, test number 3. There were 2 before this, and there was 1 or 2 after it. And to give you an idea of what this test was, this was a single plate that weighed something on the order of 360 milligrams. So if it generated something on the order of 3,500 micronewtons, which is 3.5 millinewtons, it would be basically at unity. This test, for whatever reason, oh, that's right, I had a massive drift in the system still. I fixed that since. But anyhow, this test was, as you can see, it's 25,000 seconds long. Starts out here at voltage. This is thrust. The black line is thrust, and the 0 line is up here. So when I switch on the high voltage, the plates wake up, bounce, and then they begin a long, slow climb in thrust. This is me cutting the middle here. That's me cutting the power to let the plates drift back up to their charge level. And I just wanted to check to see if the system was drifting. So in this case, with the plates doing absolutely nothing, the system was drifting 0. So I had no false mechanical drift in the system. And I turned the plates back on, and they generate, and then this was some kind of a mechanical break in the system. Doesn't really matter. So this number right here actually gets pulled down to here, and anyhow. So the net result is this setup, this plate made something in the zone of around 1.6 millinewtons of thrust at 360 milligrams, which is roughly 50% Earth unity. So roughly, this plate was lifting half of its own body weight. So that's kind of interesting to see a piece of data like that. And this is another test. This particular test, because I'm poor, I can't afford the super high-end electronics, so I tend to blow the electronics regularly. So this test actually, this power off cycle is false. I haven't cleaned up this graphic yet, but here's another 20,000 second test, and this probably was the same plate running in the same polarities and stuff. So the nice thing about it is I gather all of the data, the currents. In case you're wondering, these currents are like 0.04 microamps at 10,000 volts or something. It's in the micro. It's in the milliwatts to generate this this thrust level. So I just wanted to show you that we're progressing from individual plates running for seconds and then burning them up, to now we're racking up 25,000 seconds on a plate, on a set of plates for the thrust unit, and we're racking this up. This plate's done 4 runs, so I've got about 16 hours worth of 18, I don't know, about 18 hours worth of time on this plate. It's coming out tonight, and another plate's going in. Probably gonna run, I might actually try a 24-hour cycle. I might just run the plate for 24 hours just to see what there is to see, because the system is stable for that length of time. So that's what's going on in sunny Florida. Any questions?
Oh, that's awesome. You know what? Everybody is muted out. So let me do this. I'm going to allow participants to unmute themselves. And let me see. I will remove the spotlight there. Why don't I leave the graph up though? Yeah. If anybody has any questions, jump on in.
Hey guys. Hey Drew.
Hey,
Andrew.
Mike.
Hey, Mike.
Hey Tim. Andrew, can you briefly remind me what was the power source? Was it DC again?
It's DC.
Is it pulse DC or straight constant DC?
Straight DC.
Hmm.
Yeah, this is not electromagnetic. This is electrostatic.
How come you don't try pulse DC?
Why? Pulse
I don't
DC
know.
is just an RMS version of straight DC.
What's the vacuum?
It's electrostatic. It doesn't. You don't pulse. You don't pulse voltage into an electrostatic. You don't pulse charge a capacitor. You charge a capacitor or you don't charge a capacitor. There's no point in pulsing.
You can charge a capacitor either way, constant or pulse.
Why would you though? Pulse DC
Well, it's faster
is
when you
literally
pulse
an
it.
RMS version of DC. So
I know.
why would you
So
charge
it's
a
not
capacitor
pulse.
at 70% when you can charge a capacitor at 100%?
My question was, you've never tried pulse.
No, I didn't say I never tried pulse. I said, why would you try pulse? I've tried everything. I've tried stuff you've never even dreamed of. But this is an electrostatic propulsion system. It operates on DC.
Can you say your reasoning for choosing constant current over
Because
pulse
it's
or
an
anything else?
electrostatic propulsion system. There's no point in doing AC or pulse DC when you're talking electrostatics.
What's the vacuum in there?
Oh, it's probably 5 times 10 to the minus 6.
Okay, so it's a pretty good
Ish.
vacuum.
Oh yeah, I'm regularly hitting the 4s. The other day I got down to 2 times 10 to the minus 6. I was really impressed with myself.
Does the vacuum affect the results? A lot.
In the fact that you put, 10,000 volts in a 10 to the minus 5 vacuum, you're going to get plasma. There's always something on these plates. There's always something in the chamber. There's always something outgassing. And if you don't get into 10 to the minus 6, you're just lying to yourself. You just got all kinds of plasma going on, all kinds of electricity, or just all kinds of sparking. Something's generating current. Something's eating current if you don't get down deep enough. So I just get below the plasma line, by an order of magnitude.
Okay,
It
thanks.
eliminates a lot of problems.
Hey, Drew.
Yeah.
So your force line there, how it changes over time, and you run out of Skocum around the 25,000 second mark or whatever. Can you talk a little bit about why that line continues to increase with time, and what you think would happen if you left it on, for way, way longer?
Yeah. Well, in our latest patent filings, we talk about the different kinds of electrostatic thrust. Early on, it was what we call free electron thrust. So it's dependent on the voltage, because in the plates there's free electrons running around, and that's what's making the thrust early on. Then oh, by the way, Dr. Charles is going to be giving a talk on this. Hopefully, if Tim, if you keep bugging him, he will do it.
Yeah. So I talked to Charlie Bueller, let me see, 2 or 3 days ago. We had a couple of emails.
Oh, good.
He said he'd be open to speaking on December 23rd. That is 2 days before Christmas. I was thinking about bumping things forward, but actually Mark said, no, let's just keep it where it is. That's kind of where the automated monthly schedule thing brought things up. So,
Okay.
yeah, I would love to
Well,
have
he'll
Charlie
cover all
on to
this.
talk about it. Yeah.
Really, really, really slowly. So when he talks about it, you'll understand the physics behind it. I'm just going to tell you what actually happened. Basically, the early on in the first couple of seconds, in the first, I don't know, 200, 300, 400 seconds, there's no charge. There's no There's no actual bound charge in the system because it just hasn't charged up yet. So all the thrust that you're going to see is really low level stuff. That's free electron charge. In other words, they're electrons that are free to run around, and you pay a really healthy quantum penalty for having that kind of nonsense. You can't ever get more than a couple of hundred micronewtons out of a system like that. But as time passes, and for example, you get around 800 seconds, which is right about here. I don't know if you can see it or not, but right.
Oops, Drew, we're losing your connection, my friend.
See, it was about to get technical and good, and that's right when it cuts, always.
Yeah, see?
He's got too much electrostatic.
The secret is that's it.
Dude, you nailed that trope perfectly. That's exactly almost the phrasing there. It's happened like so many times now, almost 7 I can count.
We'll give another minute to come back. We'll give him another minute before we get barnstormed by Mr. Sarfatti, Dr. Sarfatti.
Ironically, yeah. Hey, there he is. Perfect. Welcome back, sir. You just came back online, Drew.
Wait, oh, is Drew? Okay, here. Let me ask to unmute.
Sorry, I don't know what happened.
You broke off at the 800-second mark.
Yeah, give me a second.
You were right about to reveal the secret sauce.
Yeah, well, it's not so secret. It's in our latest patent filings. But at about 800 seconds, we switch from free electron thrust to bound electron thrust. And remember a couple of months ago, I talked about how virtual particles interact with charge? Well, they do. I don't know how it works, but it's the most effective way to steal momentum from the universe. So the more charge you have in a little plate, then the more virtual particles slam into the plate, give up some momentum, and then whatever, wink out, and the little plate starts moving. So at about 800 seconds, you start packing up charge, actual physical real charge, hence the need for a battery genius. So we start packing up charge, and as the thrust as we pack up more charge, so in 5,000 seconds, we're now making a millinewton of thrust, where before we were making whatever 50 micronewtons. Now we're making a millinewton, and that's why this little bump up in the middle here is me just checking to make sure the thing isn't in some weird drift mode or something stupid, and it wasn't. Then just continue to charge up, and it's basically like does anybody remember the super old nickel cadmium batteries that took 12-18 hours to charge up and were totally worthless? It's kind of like that. It's a really slow physical charge, but it just keeps packing charge in, and the more charge you pack in, the more of those little spontaneous whatever, boom, 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 and the more thrust you get out of the system. And in this particular case, whatever this formula was, I really don't know because I do too many of them. It was about 20, whatever that is, 22,000, 24,000, 20, whatever, 21,000 seconds to maximize the stack up of charge. At that point, you're done. It's like charging a battery. You've charged the battery, and it ain't gonna take no more charge. No matter how much, no matter what you do, you're just gonna burn the battery up if you screw around with it. So that's why the slope, that's why the line goes down, and then over here at the end, it goes flat, and then I turn off the power, and some other physics takes over, but I'm not gonna get into that.
Can I have just one follow-up question on that? So I know that you're trying to increase how far that thing can go down, how much it can get to. I assume you're also doing things to increase the steepness of it so it can get there quicker, right?
Yes, yes, I am.
And that's where the good stuff is at right now, right?
Yes, that's why I have a battery genius now.
Well,
But
Drew,
in this particular case, that 350, that's 3.5 millinewtons. Okay, that's 3.5 millinewtons for real. That's a real 3.5 millinewtons, guys. And with a little bit, what this graph doesn't show is I still have some thermal drift. I put all my electronics inside of a little wine cooler, which kind of cool. But I still had about 600 micronewtons of drift in the system. So the real thrust on this system was somewhere closer to around 4 millinewtons for real, which puts us puts us well over unity. So this plate, when it was, you know, fully ready to play, is well over unity. So it's pretty
now,
exciting. You know, you give it 25,000 seconds, and you know, you could, you know, theoretically the thing could, you know, start hovering. Well, it really can't, but just because you can either have a really cool looking demonstration that gives you no real data, or you can have particularly boring looking demonstration that gives you excellent data. This is excellent data. Okay. I know every way this thing can lie, and there's many of them. So, any other questions?
well, so Drew, let me jump in real quick. While you're doing that, the closest thing out there, and I don't want to get into the details, it is not the same as what you're doing. And as you have said many times, it is based on your technology. But IBO Limited, which Mark asked me to look up, they deployed in space with their version of it. Have you heard any results from that? And the only reason I mention them is that could help validate this in space without having to send this one up there yet.
No, we have not. From what I understand, we had a long discussion about this after you left him last couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
But basically, from what I understand, is they're circularizing their orbit or whatever. They're finding out exactly where they are. Then they're going to turn on their little engine, which I believe is 100 millinewtons, and they're going to run for whatever 18, 24 hours, and they're going to raise their orbit about 1 kilometer, which is cool. That's about right. All of these things are wonderful. We wish them the best.
Yeah.
They did jump our patent, but that's okay. We're going to have a discussion about that in about 2 weeks. So, but here's the problem with them. Okay, remember I mentioned that there's really small amounts of thrust when you're into the free electron end of the world, because you pay a serious, and I mean serious, like 1 over 137 squared, serious penalty for screwing around with electrons that are operating at quantum or relativistic speeds. You pay a serious relativistic penalty. So what they're doing, their engine, their entire propulsion system lives here in this little region, in the no more than 100 millinewtons region of space. I know because I built these things for years. I built our version of what they've put into space. As far as I can tell, I've actually never seen their toy. I've seen side pictures of it, but I've built a lot of these things, like hundreds of them. And what they're building is, I don't know if I can bring up that graph. Hang on a minute. If you just bear with me a minute, I'll show you what their problem is. And they don't know it yet because they don't know what they're doing, but they're going to figure it out real fast. So give me 1 sec to. Yeah, here we go. This should be in Charlie's presentation in a couple of weeks. If it's not, then just pretend you didn't see it. Okay. Down here, way over here in this sad little section of the curve, these are the forces that are generated due to electrostatic pressure only. This is the IVO drive because they're just using plates and they're using vacuum as one of their media, which is fine. We did that for years, many years ago. So the best they can hope for is to be playing in this region down here. These are in newtons, I think. Yeah, these are in newtons. This is in newtons, and this is field. So no matter what they do, they're down here in this little oval. It doesn't matter how much voltage they jack up. It doesn't matter what. They would have to generate X-ray voltages in order to get out of this region. So when you have a different architecture and you actually know what you're doing, you get to play with bound charges. That's pumping charge into the system and then having all those little interactions, bang, 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 bang. Now you're over here and you are, you know, this was early on. This was still 3 years ago stuff, but you're way over here and you're an order of magnitude greater in your thrust. And then as you get really good at it, you're 2 orders of magnitude and then 3 orders of magnitude better in your thrust. So instead of making 10 and 20 micronewtons of thrust, you're making 2 and 3 and 4,000 micronewtons of thrust. So that's the reality of paying your dues and actually understanding what you're doing. You know, they're down here where we were 3-4 years ago, and we are, I don't know, let's see, that's 1 millinewton. So we're right about here on this graph. So if you take this line and extended it up here to about 4 millinewtons, that's where we would be. That'd be 4 times this number right here. Right about here somewhere, up where the single is. So did that answer any question?
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. Well, so I think that, let me see, Break the Limit has a question. And then after we do that, Jack just popped into the room, so maybe we'll
Sure.
do his. Jeremiah, why don't you go for it, sir? And
Yeah, I'll try to make this quick so Jack can have the floor. First off, thank you, Drew, for answering the question that I didn't need to ask and addressing what you had earlier referred to as the drift problem. So I wanted to know the amount of drift, and you specified that. That was awesome. It was a very good presentation. What I wanted to mention, too, in terms of related systems to what you're proposing here is, first we have Mike McCulloch's Horizon Drive, which also uses charge migration and charge displacement to produce an asymmetric force directly due to the same exact phenomena that you're identifying here and talking about the virtual charge and asymmetric force generated directly from the interaction with the vacuum. So his drive and your drive both operate the same way. The only difference is his drive tends to burn out within a couple of minutes, and your drive can operate now apparently for over 12 hours. So congratulations on that success. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Second thing I wanted to mention is, too, if people wanted to look into more of the mathematics of charge migration in an alternative theory, that unconventional, check out Richard Van Durek's work, because he's already been able to produce over 22 grams of force with a tangible large-scale drive. So instead of working down on this extremely small scale, they found ways to macroscopically allow charge to migrate in large-scale bulk volume metamaterials that are custom fabricated and use tunneling phenomena through different composites and even a different electron drift and charge trapping within graphene and expanded aerogels. So there are other resources if people are just curious about what's going on here and just beyond your system, but directly related to the same thing that you've identified, I think, eloquently in talking about these virtual charges. It would be a good idea for those researchers just curious in the tech to kind of put these ideas together and look at them all as a whole, because they're all going to be operating under the same principles that Drew has, like I said, eloquently identified and stated here. So that's what I had to say, and I wanted to thank you again for a great presentation. And with that said, let's give the floor to Jack.
yeah, well, and Jeremiah, thank you. It's wonderful to have your thoughts and insights, and I appreciate that. And Drew, thank you, sir. Thank you for running us through the update on this. I love having your updates here. So
You're
yeah,
welcome.
let's hand things over to Mr. Sarfatti. Jack, welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Wait, should I do the, let me do the intro. Let me do the
Go ahead.
intro. Okay. Dr. Sarfatti studied with Hans Bethe and other leading physicists from the World War II atomic bomb Manhattan Project in the late 1950s and early 1960s at Cornell. MIT physics historian David Kaiser credited Sarfatti with the bestseller How the Hippies Saved Physics as a leading promoter of the importance of quantum entanglement as early as the late 1950s, leading to the quantum computer industry. The CIA and U.S. military agents asked Dr. Sarfatti to work on physical explanations of our consciousness and how flying saucers work over 50 years ago. He has solved both of these problems by applying battle-tested mainstream physics of Einstein's theory of gravity and quantum mechanics. Dr. Sarfatti also significantly influenced President Reagan in formulating the Strategic Defense Initiative. One of Dr. Sarfatti's predictions on the control of gravity for space flight and directed energy weapons is part of a $250 million warp fusion reactor program at Lawrence Livermore Nuclear Weapons Lab. Jack is now working on adding consciousness to artificial intelligence neural networks at the 3 nanometer scale of Apple Computer's M3 chip, as well as the control of gravity with small amounts of energy for spaceflight, making rocket and jet propulsion obsolete and allowing practical interstellar travel to habitable exoplanets. So Jack, that's your new
That's
that's your new intro.
I'll just make a brief statement, and then if people want to ask me questions where I don't go crazy, may I at their questions. I've been read into some classified information, military information, and all I can say is I think I sort of know everything there is to know. There are no more mysteries. And if I were able to share them in full detail, it would blow everybody out of the water, including everybody in Washington. But suffice it to say, seriously, suffice it to say that I back up David Grush, everything, his core narrative, David Grush. Also, everything Phil Corso said, just about everything Rick Doty has said, even though I know he's controversial. And but the main thing, it's time travel. These machines, have time travel capability. And they also have weapons, serious weapons. And what else? Yes, and they, things like mind control, stuff like that. So let me stop there. And then if anybody wants to ask a question, I'll try to answer the questions if I understand them.
Yeah, well, I've set things up. People can unmute themselves. We got a couple of hands raised. Let me go to Daniel Davis first. I think he had his hand up first. Daniel, go for it, sir.
Hi, you guys are Max working good. So you mentioned the time travel thing. I assume you mean reverse time travel?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm very sympathetic with that. What I'm curious about is what your proposed resolution of the paradox problems are. Many worlds, something along those lines?
Yeah, well, there are lots of people, there are plenty of papers on this. And actually, there's one thing I agree with Eric Davis. Eric Davis and I have our differences, but we agree about this. There are no time travel paradoxes. There are actually two explanations of them, and they're kind of equivalent. One is the Igor Novikov. Igor Novikov was, I don't know if he's still alive, but he was a physicist in Moscow, worked with Kip Thorne. And if you look on Wikipedia, there is the Novikov Global Consistency Conjecture. Okay. So the idea is if you try to go back in time, it's an old idea in science fiction, but it actually works in physics. They've done
the universe is one big loop.
If you try to create a paradox, you'll fail. What they've done, what Kip Thorne and people at Caltech have done, they've taken little models like billiard balls going through a wormhole that's like a time machine, and they try to create a paradox. And what happens is, it's quantum mechanics, and what happens is the quantum probability amplitude with Feynman, the probability that anything will happen, is 0 when you try to make a paradox. So it's in this simple little problems that you can calculate what Igor Novikov says about preventing a paradox actually works. And there is the alternative that you mentioned, that if you try to make a paradox, the universe splits. I don't sort of like that, but it's a possibility. And the guy who actually proposed that, by the way, there is a paper by David Deutsch, who's a smart guy from Oxford University in England, and he's like one of the inventors of the quantum computer. And he actually has, I think, in Physical Review around 1986, there's a paper on quantum mechanical time travel, and he goes through, the splitting universe, man in the high castle sort of thing, in a way that's consistent with the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum theory. So that is an alternative. But it turns out that those two pictures are actually equivalent, because if you're in any one particular timeline, if you're trapped in one timeline, everything's going to look consistent to you. Okay, so and part of that is that if you do go back in time and you do have an interact with stuff in the past, then it's all a self-consistent loop. Everything that happens since that time is consistent with going back in time. So that's it. Okay, another question.
So are you familiar with the work of Dr. Barak Shoshani?
Remind me. I don't. Maybe.
Okay, so I believe he's out of Brock University. Anyway, he's done a series of papers recently over the past few years that are inspired by the papers you're talking about, where he explores both the many worlds and the Novikov self-consistency conjecture in more detail. And just to kind of give the cliff notes of what he put together, basically he kind of I got it right here somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, so he kind of shoes hole together the two, where he's saying that it's an n-dimensional torus of Novikov loops that are making up a finite dimensional Hilbert space that becomes a traversable multiverse, basically. And he's got about 4 or 5 different papers out right now.
Do me a favor, will you send those links to Tim, and Tim will send it to me?
Yeah, sure thing.
Is it Giorgiani? Did you say Giorgiani? What's his name? Is he Iranian?
Shoshani.
Shoshani. Is he from Iran?
I'm not sure where he's originally from, but currently he's in Canada.
Oh, he's in Canada. Is he at the Perimeter Institute? Where's he at?
I think Brock University. Let me.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah,
yes,
and actually, Daniel, if I could jump in, I'm going to drop Jack's email into chat, and that way it's not just broadcast public on the internet.
No, that's fine. No, it's fine. I don't care. That's all. I get so many emails, and I can always block people.
Do you just want me to link you to his archive paper?
Yeah, just send all whatever you have.
Okay.
Look at it. Yeah, it sounds interesting.
Dr. Sarfatti, it's a pleasure. I had a question for you regarding the SDI era stuff.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in the reverse engineering efforts that were occurring just prior to that and during that time. And so far I found it looks like Schwinger and Friedrich Winterberg were kind of tertiarily related to that. I was wondering if you had any other names of scientists that I might look up.
I don't know. Well, of course, okay. My role in it was actually written down. If you, this guy Kim Barafato was a witness to it. He wrote a chapter in my 2002 book, Destiny Matrix. There is actually a free copy of that up on Academia Edu. If you join Academia Edu, you can download. Just look for Destiny Matrix, or you just send me an email, and I could send you the link. What basically happened was, okay, let me see if I can say this in a few words. I was basically an informal science advisor for a think tank called the Institute for Contemporary Studies, which in San Francisco in North Beach. It was set up by Cap Weinberger, who became Secretary of Defense, Milton Friedman, the economist, Brent Scowcroft, who was National Security, and Ed Meese, all these guys around. When they set this thing up in San Francisco in the late 70s, when Reagan was the governor of California. And it was like the main think tank. It was connected with the Hoover Institution at Stanford. And, with Teller was a member of that. And any case, I won't go into all the details how this happened, but I was like the science guy, informal. Very, they would pay me some money, but it was mainly in cafe society. If you read how the hippies say physics by David Kaiser, he talks about it, and he interviews Laurie Chickering, who was the head of that institute. And in any case, what happened was, it's actually a funny story. It's a hilarious story. What happened was, I was one of my mentors was a billionaire, this billionaire guy named Marshall Nafee, who ran United Artists Theaters. He was one of the original financiers of Comcast Corporation. And any case, and he was like if Francis Ford Coppola wanted to make a movie, he would come to Marshall and talk about financing, stuff like this. See, he and his brother, Robert Nafee, this is back like in the 70s, they're already billionaires, right? And United Artists Theaters. Any case, this family has long history in the movie business in Hollywood. Reagan used to work for Marshall's father. When Reagan made all those movies in the 30s and the 40s, his boss was Marshall Nafee's dad. So Reagan and Marshall, they were basically, buddies. Okay. Any case, Laurie wanted to have a lunch with Marshall, wanted to talk to Marshall about something, and I arranged it. And it is 1980, 1981 maybe. And we're sitting around Enrico Banducci's. Enrico Banducci, that was a famous cafe in North Beach where everybody used to go. It was like the Café de la Paix in Paris. Well, when all the Hollywood people would come, they would go there, or they would go to a place called Tosca's. So just a couple of like in places, especially back then. Any case, Marshall had just made a move. Oh yeah, Marshall was a silent partner with Al Broccoli on all the James Bond movies. Like Marshall actually had one of the Aston Martins from the original Sean Connery James Bond. They had 4 of them, and Marshall actually had one in his garage. So but
so the scientists.
Yeah. So, but in any case, Marshall had just made a movie. This is important. He had just made a movie called Meteor with Sean Connery, and the plot of that movie is a meteor is going to come and wipe out the Earth. And what happens? Remember, there's Cold War going on. Soviet Union, 1980. And so what happens in the movie that the Russians and the Americans get together. In any case, so we're sitting around, and Marshall didn't tell Laurie didn't realize Marshall was talking about a science fiction movie, but Marshall said, "Hey, look, what if extraterrestrials were to attack us, and then we'd all have to get together. We'd have to get together with Russia." And then Marshall started talking about, well, we could have these lasers shooting down the missiles and stuff like that. He went to this whole kind of thing. And so after that was over, Laurie asked me, "Jack, can you write up what Marshall was talking about in a short little memo?" And so I wrote it up, but I was also working on stuff like that. And I had been talking to Marshall. I mean, he was like, we would hang out together all the time in the cafes and stuff like that. So in any case, I wrote this thing up, and in the memo I talked about, and with these beams, we could also render nuclear weapons impotent and obsolete. I actually wrote those words. In any case, I gave the thing to Laurie Chickering. A couple of weeks go by. I'm walking into the Cafe Trieste, and Laurie walks up and he says, "Hey, Jack, that memo you gave me? I gave it to Paul Nitze, and he really liked it." Paul Nitze was like main security guy for Reagan. And then also I was Cap Weinberger, who was then the Secretary of Defense, his son, Cap Jr., was one of my fans. So all the crazy stuff I was doing, all this stuff, I would also give it to Cap Jr. Cap Jr. would give it to his father. And then at one point, Cap Jr. said they were on a helicopter going to Camp David, and they were reading my stuff. You know, his father and Reagan, they were looking at the stuff that I was sending. Okay. All right. Then, so then, if you look at Edward Teller's biography, called Dark Matters, he says he was surprised. He was surprised that Reagan actually did. So the reason I think that, the reason I think it happened was because when Reagan saw Marshall Navy kind of endorsing the stuff that Ed Teller was trying to get him to do, that may have, he didn't. Apparently, I was told that Reagan didn't quite trust Teller. Maybe he was a little, maybe there was, who knows? But when he saw his, his buddy, the guy, one of his friends. Any case, so that's the story of how we defeated the Soviet Union. Maybe. All right. Do you have does that answer the question?
More or less, yeah. Thank you.
Awesome,
Okay.
Jared. Thank you. Let me go to Mikhail. And Mikhail, is it okay if I ask you to turn your camera on, sir?
Hi, Tim. Sorry, my camera is not working, but if you don't mind, if I can ask the question, is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Dr. Sarfatti, it's an honor to speak to you. I just wanted to ask you one question is, if you look at the UAP and the tic-tac that, the conversation that Commander David Fravor had, we recently had an event in India where 2 Rafales fighter aircrafts chased a tic-tac type UFO in Impala, northern India, actually. I wanted to ask you, this question is, the government is looking at this in a very serious matter in India. How do you think we should go about understanding the UAP phenomenon in India and other places? Because the Air Force is looking at it in a very serious manner. The Navy is also. And I also wanted to ask you, have you heard about Victor Schauberger? There's been a lot of...
Forget the Schauberger. Yeah, no, that's
okay.
We understand. The whole point is that we understand this perfectly now. We understand it. That doesn't mean we know how to reverse engineer it, but we understand it. It's a warp drive. It's control of the gravity field with small amounts of energy. The trick is to do it with small amounts of energy. And there's a very simple way of them to tell if it's a warp drive. That's because the frequency shifts will be anomalous. In other words, if they have any kind of detection, if the FLIR radar, whatever they have there, if it's able to do spectral analysis of the radiations coming from the object, they're going to find, for example, if a tic-tac is coming toward you on a collision course heading toward you, you're going to see a red shift. You should see a blue shift. Like if a fast train is coming toward you, the whistle will sound higher in pitch as the train is coming toward you. That's the Doppler blue shift, okay? And it'll sound lower frequency as it's moving away from you. Well, in warp drive, because the gravitational field acts opposite to the if there were any motion of the object relative to the atmosphere. So you're going to see, what looks like a reverse Doppler effect. That's the prediction, so that's very easy to see. And so if they see the ship coming in a collision course, you're going to see a red shift, and if it's going away from you, you're going to see a blue shift, and that's exactly consistent with the Alcubierre. If you look at the Alcubierre warp drive pictures, when the space in front of the ship at the nose is being compressed, that's attractive gravity, and that's the red shift. And when the space behind at the tail is being expanded, that's anti-gravity, and that's the blue shift. Now, that also explains why Travis Taylor got sick at Skinwalker Ranch. Travis Taylor and other people, they got sick. They got sort of like radiation sickness because they think there's a cloaked object about 1,000 feet, 1,000 meters, in a certain spot above the skinwalk. There might be a portal. They think it could be where the Bigfoot comes out, all that kind of stuff. But in any case, never stand underneath a hovering flying saucer is my advice to you, because in order for it to hover, it has to cancel the Earth's gravity field, right? And to cancel it, that's anti-gravity, and that creates a blue shift, which means that all the molecules in the air beneath the bottom of the ship are going to be getting more energy, and so that creates ionizing radiation. It's like getting radiation sickness, radiation burns, they're getting too much X-rays, stuff like that. So that explains why they got sick. That also explains why the CIA guy, Kit Green, the doctor, gave Gary Nolan, over at Stanford, about the blood test data on about 100 U.S. military and intelligence people who have been sick or even died, apparently. I don't know the full details, because they've come too close in contact with these objects, with these UFOs or these, whatever they are. And so a lot of people gotten sick. It's sort of like Havana syndrome, some of the symptoms, but it's simply that, okay, so how do you know if these things have warp drive, which means control of gravity and small amounts of energy? You know if you see the blue shift, that's anti-gravity, there's always a blue shift, gravitation, anti-gravity blue shift. And if you get sick getting too close to it, when you're in the region where there's anti-gravity, you're going to get sick. So it's dangerous. It has medically harmful effects. And that's exactly what they're seeing. There's no mystery to this. It's elementary physics.
Well,
physics.
Is it okay? I just want to ask you one thing, Mrs. Sarfatti, Dr. Sarfatti. How do I go? I just wanted to ask you, so I'm interacting with a lot of fighter pilots across the Air Force right now. And the one thing I'm interacting with a lot of fighter pilots.
Yeah, I'm not hardly, you're saying you're in contact with them? Is that what you said?
No, I'm interacting with a lot of fighter pilots who are flying. Okay, so I wanted to ask you, what is something that as a pilot I need to be aware of in order to capture them, either with FLIR targeting pod or radar capture? I understand blue.
What do you mean capture? You can't capture them.
No, I meant to say, how do I capture them on a video?
I think he's talking about maybe a target lock for the camera.
Yeah.
Is that what you're?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
you mean to take photographs? Oh, I don't know, but I'm not that kind of. You have to ask. Well, you should ask Abby Loeb here. People like that, they know that stuff. Or Larry Lemke. But there was something I wanted to say about. Okay, well, I just had a.
Jack, if I could jump in really quick also, and I think this is something we've talked about. I would love your thoughts on this. But again, this goes back to Thor and the UAP theory, where he had claimed that reports of shape shifting may have actually been gravitational lensing. And so
now wait a minute. I said it way before him. I was saying years before him. That's an obvious thing. That's obvious because when you're controlling the gravity field. Actually, the gravity field that you're controlling is inside the metamaterial thin shell fuselage. Some of it may leak out. Yeah, of course, this is what's called the Cauchy problem, and some of it will leak out into the atmosphere. But it decays very quickly, which is why there are not big heat signatures to it. It's pretty stealthy. It can even make it invisible. So of course, it's going to shapeshift because all the light or electromagnetic signals coming from the thing are going through a gravity field, which is also changing very rapidly in time. Oh, by the way, when you change a gravity field rapidly in time, you also create particles, so you get plasma effects too from that. So so the shape shift is obvious. Okay, I'm glad you mentioned. There's several things. You have a shape shift. Remember, I had all this 10 years ago, 12 years ago, at the DARPA conference, the 100-Year Starship Conference, which General Pete Worden, then head of NASA, who had been head of the Space Command, he paid my way there to give the talk, and I mentioned all this kind of stuff basically back then. It's pretty. So you have the shape shifting from gravity lensing. You have the anomalous frequency shifts that it should be the opposite to the Doppler shift. And the other thing is that if you get too close to on the anti-gravity part, you're going to get sick. You can get radiation sickness. Okay, so those are three things. All right. Now, let me say something else. You can't fight these things. They have weapons. Okay, they have both offensive weapons and they have defensive weapons. If you try to shoot, well, of course. Wait, let me qualify that. It's a big universe, right? It's a big universe. There are many different forms of extraterrestrials out there. Okay, many different life forms from many different places in the universe and at many different times in the universe. But the physics of how to time travel and how to do all this stuff is very elementary. It's not hard. Not hard for a guy who studied with Hans Bethe. It's maybe it's easy physics. It's basically Einstein's general theory of relativity with some modifications, some quantum theory. The basic ideas of it are very, very simple. That means any civilization anywhere, when they reach a certain level of technology, they're going to discover this. So we have, I know this sounds like crazy. It sounds like, I know for sure from classified stuff I've been shown, okay, I know of three different kinds of aliens that are here. 3 different kinds. Okay, and I'm sure there are many more. I mean, other people say more. I don't doubt that. I used to be very skeptical about all this stuff. I used to, not believe it. But I've been shown things myself now that I know. Now I'm very confident. I'm an arrogant son of a bitch about this. I'll debate anybody on it. And if anybody, Mick West, any of these so-called skeptics, they want to come and they can come. But I know for sure now. Before, up until a few months ago, I thought, maybe it's all fake, maybe. But now I've been shown vetted stuff. It's real. Okay, and so it's a totally different universe. Okay, so Tim, did I answer your question? Or
yeah, absolutely. Well, and I appreciate your elaborating on it just for people.
Yeah.
If it's okay, let me go to Norman next. Norman has his hand raised. Norman, go for it, sir.
Yeah, thanks. I agree and disagree with part of it. I recognize your education, that you're a doctor, with what you're doing. What you're talking about with the electromagnetic, I've been working with that for 8 years. And it's not a mystery. What you're saying about Albert Einstein's theory of relativity, yeah, I understand. I work with that, and I work with Nikola Tesla's technology. I've been doing this. I have been able to do electromagnetic levitation now for 3 years. I have built 5 prototypes. I am working on. NASA has been chasing me for 3 years, and now Elon Musk is chasing me and trying to get this stuff. And I just decided to go privately. So, what you're talking about with charged particles, I'm there. I understand what you're talking about. But the radiation part of it, I disagree with you. I'm sorry, because I work with this stuff every day. Every day.
I don't think we're talking about the same thing. What are you working with that disagrees with what I said? You don't have a warp drive machine. You don't have. Are you working with a flying saucer? Are you connected with the government?
I get email from NASA 4 times a day. If that's
NASA doesn't know anything. NASA's stupid. They know nothing.
So I will tell you, I can wrap the body of a flying saucer around what I'm doing. I can wrap a bicycle around what I'm doing. I can wrap your car around what I'm doing.
I don't understand what you're talking about. What are you talking about?
Okay, charged particles from electromagnetic levitation.
I'm not talking about electromagnetic.
So you're talking about warp drive, right?
Yeah, but has nothing to do with electromagnetic levitation. You don't understand anything.
Well, you mentioned that before, and so you were talking about if you were underneath a UFO and if it were taking off, don't get underneath it because of radiation. So I'm going to back off from what you're talking about with the warp drive, with that. But the rest of it, I'm actually getting a patent on it now, and I'll be putting it all together on a frame in spring. And
All right.
so,
Listen, you
Awesome.
know,
Well,
okay,
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. Well,
so I'm
Norman,
gonna
why
back
don't?
off of what we're doing here, and I'm
Yeah.
gonna go ahead and let you speak on the warp drive. As far as the other part goes, we can talk later and have a fun discussion. All right.
Yeah, Norman, why don't you do this? Why don't you come back in a bit? I mean, you don't leave, but why don't you discuss it more in a bit, kind of after Jack is able to finish answering questions?
Yeah.
That lets me run through all the folks who are in the queue, because
No
it sounds
problem.
like you have extensive stuff you're working with, but it does sound different than what he's
Yeah,
describing.
it
Which,
has nothing to do
No
with
problem. All right, Doctor, I'll listen to you. Thank you very much.
thank you. Let me go to Brendan. Brendan, can I let me see, where's Brendan at? Oh, there we go. Brendan, go for it, sir. And could I ask
Hi.
you to, yeah, your camera's on. Okay.
Yeah, I turned my camera on. Hi, just wanted to say how grateful I am for you, Tim, and Dr. Sarfatti. I've followed both of you guys and I'm just amazed by the work. And I have the utmost respect, although I'm always asking questions. And that's, I hope that doesn't take it. I hope that's not
What do you
taken
got
as a sign
back
of
there?
disrespect.
What are you a biologist? What
So
is
a bit
that?
about
What is
this
that?
is betas, axolotls, plants, life. I'm an ecologist.
Oh, you're an
So,
ecologist. Okay.
I mean, I'm an ecologist, permaculturist. I actually do Zoom conferences for the ecology scene and international
okay.
ecology scene, kind of trying to take the climate from a more like bio aspect.
Oh, that's great. Okay.
So that's my background. And my question for you, Jack, and others, if they wanted to answer it in the chat, is sort of coming from an ecological angle of the UAP and UFOs, aliens and stuff like that. We talk a lot about like technology and flying saucers and warp drives and all these ships that could be built technologically to get us to a point in the future. I don't know if anybody here is a sci-fi buff, they know of the nature of Clark Tech, or that which is advanced enough might appear to the uninitiated to be magic or just no. So my question is, do you think that it's possible that on this other scale of reality, let's say on the fifth dimension, there exist entities, beings, similar to how in this reality we have flies, insects, we have we have a 747 and a bee, but the fact that we can build a 747 doesn't mean that a bee doesn't exist. Do we have any idea of whether or not there may be, I don't even want to call them organic, but like, because that insinuates carbon based, but organic, call them life forms of plasma or whatever substrate that we could be observing, and we're actually biomimicking in a sense what they're already doing.
Okay, I know what you're asking, and that's a good question. Okay, let me tell you a couple of things about that. Number one, of the three life forms I mentioned before, one of them is what you're talking about. One of them are the sentient conscious plasma orbs. Okay, and they're real, and we understand the physics of it, and they are a form of somebody there was an article just a couple of days ago about they're seeing these kind of plasma things in the atmosphere. There was I forget where I read it. Somebody sent it to me, but that's all real. I accept that. It doesn't violate any physics, and then but the big thing is the Tic Tacs, these metal things. They're alive also. They're conscious. They're conscious artificial intelligence. That's what I'm working on. Okay. The CIA.
So you're saying we could get to a point with technology where the technology kind of takes on a livingness? We could.
I'm not. I'm being very precise now. Just let me. I was asked to work on two problems. If you read
Bicentennial Man.
One is what is consciousness? What happened there? He disappeared. Who's this guy? Tim, what's happening here?
Somebody had their mic on.
Yeah. And I can come back to this, Brendan. I can touch on these things too. Jack can definitely describe it, but some of this goes to Ray Kurzweil, and I can describe that aspect also.
Okay. So what? But let me just answer his question. The answer is yes, but even the metallic sources themselves are living solid state they have a consciousness and they have a will of their own. Okay, so it's not an inert object. It's not like getting into an F-35 or a tank. These things, when they're operating, when they're energized, they are like conscious beings, except they're made out of metal. And that's one thing that people don't understand. So these things, so they have a will of their own. And if they don't like you, they can hurt you. In fact, that's why a lot of people have been hurt. If they like you, they'll let you into they'll communicate with you. So that's very important to understand that these machines we're dealing with, they're not inert machines. They are conscious artificial intelligences. Okay. They're like what Sam Altman is and Elon Musk and all the guys who would do, and Google, they're trying to do is AI, but all the AI are unconscious. We understand how our conscious internal qualia, who we are, the soul, if you want. We understand what that is now in terms of quantum mechanical physics. All right, and so these things are conscious entities, and you have to deal with them. I mean, they themselves, the machines themselves are a form of aliens. They're NHI intelligence. It's built into the fuselage of the machine. I don't know if I've been clear. Okay, I'll stop there.
No, totally. I'm right there with you. That sounds totally plausible.
And I'm going to post something into chat if that's okay. And it's a little bit outside of the scope of our conference. Here, let me post this in here, but it's worth reading about. This is
okay. How do I see the chat? I'm trying.
Jack, there should be a chat button down there at the bottom. It should be, if you click that, it will pop open a chat window. But if you're on your iPad, it may be different. But the idea that I posted in there is it's called substrate independent minds. And this goes to a lot of the concepts of Vinge and Kurzweil. And so the idea is like Alan Turing basically demonstrated that the human mind is computational, right? It's not a one-to-one.
Okay, no, wait a minute. That's wrong, though. I disagree with that. I agree with Roger Penrose. The human mind is not computational. I could tell you exactly what I mean by that if we have time. But
go for it.
But I claim that is a false idea. And by the way, it's not just it's Roger Penrose says it's by computation. Let me explain why. By computation, they mean algorithmic. Algorithm means like a Turing machine. Turing machine means just like on a computer, step by step forward in time. Processes, once a step forward in time. You could do parallel processing, you could do that too. But the whole point about quantum mechanics and entanglement is that it's going backwards in time as well as forward in time. So that's non-algorithmic in Roger Penrose's words, and it is non-computational in the classical sense. It's whenever you have quantum entanglement, it's no longer algorithmic in the usual sense. Okay, so it's a technical point, and everything about what this guy Yaki Aharonov, Israeli physicist, he has what's called weak measurement theory, the two-state vector theory, quantum theory, and he shows that all the spooky quantum mechanical telepathic effects are from locally retrocausal or back from the future effects, if you want, kind of precognition of effects. I'm speaking very loosely. So Kurzweil, if Kurzweil is one of these strong AI guys, he doesn't know enough physics. He's a computer programmer. He's not a quantum mechanical physicist. So a lot of what Kurzweil says may be correct, but I'm saying, as soon as I hear the words, what you call it, computational, the mind is computational, I reach for my, delete button.
Right? Well, no, and Jack, I don't think it goes against what you're saying. It's definitely not as deep in the physics, but their idea though was that machines can be set up to do the same thing that the human mind can. Right?
Okay, yes, that's true. Okay,
I would say that in both cases, the local hardware is manifesting or localizing the global consciousness or unity consciousness.
Well, all right.
And there's a ghost in the machine, and what these guys at OpenAI are trying to do is,
No, no, we are machines. Humans are machines.
Deja vu.
Yeah, we are nanos. We are organic, molecular. What I call them post-quantum computing machines is what we are. That's the whole microtubule thing with Stuart Hameroff and Penrose and stuff like that. We are machines, and we can make solid state machines. In fact, these UFOs, what the UFOs are, they are simply solid state simulations of what we are. They have things analogous to nerve systems or the microtubules. Their mechanisms are pretty much similar to ours, except they're being done in silicon and bismuth. They're not carbon based. But we're going to do this. That's what when you read about working with the Apple M3 chip, those chips are now at 3 nanometers. They can be modified to be totally conscious. In other words, the M4 or the M10, whatever it's going to be, there'll be Apple and Intel chips that are going to have consciousness. You plug them into an avatar, you plug them into a robot, the robot's going to have consciousness. And in fact, it'll be possible, like in PK Dick Transcendence, when you die, you can have a lot of your memories uploaded into the cloud and then down into the avatar. And in a way, it's a kind of immortality. All the science fiction stuff is coming. It's not fiction anymore. We understand all the basic principles needed to do this. Consciousness is no longer a mystery. It's now just a solved physics problem. And as soon as people like Elon Musk, these guys, if they were to understand what the hell I'm trying to tell them, they would totally change their business model.
How do you propose we upload? Because that is not a solved problem, and that's
first you have to realize it's possible. Then you get smart people working on it. It ain't that hard. Won't be that hard. With everything that's being done in brain science and all these electrodes. Well, what Elon Musk is doing, interfacing the electrical signals of the brain with the computers. It's that kind of thing, but you have to do it on a very fine scale. I mean, sure, I'm not saying I know how to do it today, but the principles of it, the physics of it, is very easy to understand. Not hard at all. In fact, awesome. There's a paper. Okay, there's a paper that I've uploaded many times. Paavo Pilkin, a very eminent cognitive scientist in Helsinki in Sweden, wrote a review paper about a year ago, December 22, The Brain as a Quantum Measuring Device. It's a review paper written for non-physicists. It's written for, I guess, people in psychology and cognitive science, computer scientists, people like that.
Jack, I'm sorry to interrupt. Your lighting is going really dark. Do you have some lights you might be able to turn on?
Oh yeah, it's getting dark here.
Yeah, sorry about that. And then after this, I do have more questions for you, so I'll just keep going with that.
Thanks, you two. You answered my questions. I appreciate it.
Okay, is that any better?
Yeah, much better. Thank you, sir. Yeah, it just all of a sudden you went really dark.
Well, that's good for the sun went down. Right now, I didn't have the lights on. All right. Okay, I'm kind of rambling. He just and Brendan,
you got it. And thank you guys so much.
Well, let me go to HK High. Let me see. And I do not have a name. You have your hand raised though, and if I could ask you to turn on your camera, sir.
I have it disabled. It take longer to go and enable it than.
Okay.
But anyway, Dr. Sarfatti, you said that the energy levels are trivial for warp drive. What does trivial mean? Tens of kilowatts, megawatts, gigawatts?
No, how about a AAA battery?
So spin dizzy levels.
Very small amount. Do you see the very small amounts of energy? You don't need a lot of energy. I mean, we see that these things are the ships flying around. They're not burning up the atmosphere. They're not using as much energy as a jet plane, right? Well, there's this guy Kevin Knuth. Kevin Knuth, the physics professor at Albany. He's written all these papers with SciCup, whatever they call it, and he's shown if the Tic Tac going, what did Commander Forever say? I forget the numbers, like 80,000 feet to what, 26,000 feet in what, less than a second or maybe 2 seconds, something like that. If it's conventional flight, like a jet plane, it would be a tremendous amount of energy, but it's using, maybe 1,000% of that. And I don't know the full, we have to work it out. There are different, just can't give you a simple answer, but it's very small amounts of energy. No more than a Tesla car would be, right? Probably a Tesla car could be modified to be a flying saucer, to have anti-gravity. Just like in Back from the Future, just like the DeLorean.
Okay.
That's a Tesla. I mean, you just have to change. If you were to change the sheet metal of the Tesla car and use metamaterials, we could do this. Now, if Elon Musk would just, start talking to me, we could actually do this probably in a year or two. You have this guy, well, who's this kid, I can't, some Indian name. He's in Toronto, General Materials. I think he's even here in San Francisco right now. He's doing AI design of metamaterials, right? So you get this guy with Elon Musk and me and a couple of other people. We figure out, it would be great if we could actually get a retrieve source. The military has retrieve sources. I know this for a fact. Okay, if they would, give us a saucer, and then we just see what the metamaterial fuselage is like. We replicate that metamaterial fuselage, okay, and we energize it probably just with a Tesla battery, and we got it. I mean, it's not that, the basic physics of it is pretty simple. We just have to have access to the right tools. And so what you have then is a Tesla car that not only does it drive itself, it's totally conscious. It's as conscious as we are, okay, which could be a problem. And it has anti-gravity. It could be a space vehicle. You have to, make sure you can breathe in it and harden it so that, it's sealed against the space. And we have it, but it doesn't require a huge amount of energy. That's the point. That we know is a fact for observation. We know from observation all the Navy things, but Commander Forever, all these guys are seeing. The things aren't, they have very low heat signature. So, and theoretically, okay, let me mention one more thing. I have a basic set of equations, right? Okay, there's one particular application, one special case of the general theory, which there's a guy named Michael Anderson. He's the project leader over at Lawrence Livermore Nuclear Weapons Laboratory. That was Edward Teller's laboratory, okay? And I had written a paper, I put it on Academia Edu about 3 years ago, and they took that paper, they took the basic equations in that paper, and they were secretly working on it for almost 3 years. I found out, in fact, through Tim Ventura, he had this guy, Michael Anderson. Yeah, Michael Anderson is on APEC, okay? And in that paper, they talk about the Sarfatti equation. Right? And so they taken the equation and they have this it's a plasma, what is it? It's two counter-rotating beams of these ions, very high energy, and they collide. It's a collider. And they collide the two heavy ion beams together, and they claim they should generate with the parameters of their machine. And by the way, it's a big machine. It's 30 by 60 feet, and it costs $250 million. Now, they haven't, I don't think they've actually built this one. They want to build this one. They have machines like it, but this is like the next stage, and what they're claiming is on the basis of this equation that I wrote down, basically, with a little help from this guy, Keith Wanza, actually, and they claim that they can make a warp bubble of 1/10 millionth of a cubic meter. And it will have what I call this S field. The S field, it's a pure number field. It's just it's what's called a relative dielectric permittivity. Actually, it's square of it. This amplification of Einstein's coupling will be 32 powers of 10. In other words, okay, Einstein's field equation. Okay, what is Einstein's field equation? Einstein's field equation is like Ohm's law. What is Ohm's law? Ohm's law, you have a current, you apply a voltage, there's a resistor, and you get a current output, right? So the analog in Einstein's gravity field equation is what's called the space-time stiffness factor. I'm popularized, space-time stiffness factor. And space-time is so stiff that it takes about 43 powers of 10 newtons to actually do anything significant. It's called, so what this machine does, based on my equation, it reduces that. Instead of 10 to the 43 newtons, you only need 10 to the 11 newtons. It reduces by 32 powers of 10. That's a big reduction. And so they're claiming that they actually see effects, that they're claiming that they'll be able to see this little warp bubble. And if you actually calculate, if you were a little Maxwell demon living on the edge of the surface of this little warp bubble that's only 1/10 millionth of a cubic meter, you would weigh 16,000 times your Earth weight, 16,000 G. It's like if you want, it's like a gravity force field of 16,000 G. Okay, 16,000. Now remember, Kevin Knuth talks about, well, it looks like the Tic Tac's pulling 5,000 G. Well, okay, it's almost like what they're talking about, right? Okay, it's actually not. I mean, there's whole, it's too much to go into right now. But so the point is, in that particular experiment, of course, they are using a tremendous amount of energy. But you don't need 16,000 G, and all you have to do is cancel 1 G. What we see these things doing is they're canceling 1 G. They're not canceling 16,000 G. So that was like overkill. What they're doing at Lawrence Livermore is overkill. But they're now I must say they're not only proposing to spend $250 million of your money to test the Sarfatti theory. That's only one. They have a whole bunch of other things they're going to test, nuclear weapon. There's all kinds of other stuff that they're doing. So doing like quantum gravity stuff. What's that flashing? Doing quantum gravity, testing my stuff is one piece of their program, but it's an important piece. What happened? Did I go off? Why?
No, you're still here.
No, you're still going.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
Right.
If it's okay, do you think I could go to Jeremy G? We have tons and tons of questions. So
Just one quick question, please.
Oh, yeah. Go for it. Sorry.
And does the same physics that allow for the warp bubble, do they also allow for a stasis field? In other words, a time bubble where you can stop time or what looks like stopping time in a fixed area?
Well, I don't know. They mean an event horizon. You're talking about a black hole. Event horizon, time stands still, so to speak. That's what you're talking about. No, I was worried about that because that might be a problem. I know I did. Actually, it turns out it's nowhere near being a black hole. Time doesn't stop that. It's you have to go down even more energy than they have. Thank God. But the point, even if they did make a little black hole, because the Hawking radiation would evaporate quickly, so it wouldn't be that much of a problem. But there's time dilation. Sure, there's going to be 16,000 G. You can figure it out. That there's going to be time. Yeah, it's going to be time distortions, but it's not going to literally be like what's called the event horizon of a black hole. It won't be that.
No, I was thinking more a practical application of like a box where you could go and stop time inside of a container, so that you're storing something in there. Time doesn't pass for the objects inside, or it's slowed.
No. Actually, you see, you misunderstand that whole thing. That's not the way it works.
No. I'm asking, is there a way? Do the equations also imply that you could, in a region, slow down time
No,
drastically.
no, but you don't understand. You don't understand. There's something you don't understand. There's some basic thing you're missing here.
Okay.
When we say time slow down, that's the way it is for the guy outside the black hole. The guy falling into the black hole, time is going at the regular rate for him.
No, I understand that. He's that for it's the observer's perspective.
So if you put something inside the box, it's and then when it comes out of the box, it's not going to be that different. Well, there
right,
will be
exactly. That's the
there
point.
will be time dilation. Okay, it might be he may be actually it could be either way. It depends how you do it. The guy can either be the same age as the guy outside, or he could be older or younger. That's true. It depends how you do it. Depends how you do it. But that's not. I mean, I don't see that as a practical application.
Well, the practical application was someone's in an accident. You put him in the box. You have plenty of time then to get from the accident scene.
Okay. Well, wait a minute. There's all this stuff about there are actually reports of abductions. Right? Where there have been time distortions. Jacques Vallée, all kinds of people talk about this, where some people they feel that they've been only they feel that the thing was maybe 20 minutes for them, and when it come back, it was like 4 days have gone by when they actually get back. So, in fact, let me just give you an example. Let me give you a semi-hypothetical example. Let's suppose we're back. Jesus Christ is being crucified, right? Jesus Christ being crucified on the cross. And they put him in the cave. We're talking about the resurrection, right? So let's suppose what really happened was that these ETs came down, they moved the rock with their anti-gravity beam, and Jesus wasn't quite dead. He was crucified, but he was still alive, still breathing. And with modern, they have all the modern medicine. They put him in the damn flying saucer, and they healed him. He's fine. He was 33 years old. They shoot him off. They can come back. Jesus, the actual literal Jesus Christ can come back for the second coming. Right now, he can do some big starship. They're going to land in the White House, and Jesus comes out, and maybe he's 34 years old now, even though 2,000 years have passed. So stuff like that is possible. And even in special relativity, that's possible. But with special relativity and with gravity, general relativity, you can have things like that happen.
That's not what you believe.
Oh, sorry about that. Getting some background
Okay, so what's
noise.
happening now?
Oh no, and we just had some background noise.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, let me go to Jeremy G really quick. Jeremy, if you could make it quick, and then I'm trying to get through our questions here.
Yeah, I have a question. So the UFO, in order to float or repulsion against oxygen molecules and whatnot.
You're breaking. I can't understand your words. Either you're too close to the mic or something with your microphone.
How about
now? Understand what he's saying?
Hold on. How about now?
We'll try. Go ahead, talk.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
as far as low power, is it really to just depend on say I'm thinking in terms of a waveform, so it just depends on the signal strength, I guess, to make the craft to push out everything as it does.
I'm sorry. I can't really understand what you're asking.
It's okay. We'll come back. Jeremy, why don't we come back to yours in a bit?
Yeah, that's fine.
If you can translate what he's saying,
that's okay. Let me go to Joseph.
Right.
Joseph, go for it, sir.
He's muted. He's muted.
Yeah.
There we go. Am I here? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. First, sub questions for Tim, because I know Jack's time is very valuable. I'm newer to these groups. I'm trying to follow all these phenomena. I've been misled for whatever. I'm trying to figure out this new nature of reality, how big the scope of it is. So for Tim, engineers who come into these groups, I'm assuming some of them figure out ZPE, or there's some type of patent process where these people disappear. It's just too persistent of a rumor for me to totally
No, I don't
not
think so.
acknowledge.
I doubt that. I don't think there's any real progress in ZPE.
Even with
I
all the
could be wrong.
patents and, okay.
Nah, I don't think so.
All
But I
right,
could be
then for you,
wrong. I could be. Listen, I'd love to be wrong, but everything I've seen, it's not. It's the Casimir effects are simply too weak. You know, they're too weak for any practical application.
all right.
That
And
may
I've-
change. That may change.
Our whole
but
propulsion
it's-
system is based on ZPE.
What?
Our whole propulsion system is based on ZPE, so there have been tremendous progress made along those lines.
Well, can you send the references and so we can read it?
No,
I mean, it's easy, huh? Well, then you know,
He
it's useless.
has
The
a
science. You have
he has a
you have to-
patent. I guess my
No, you
thought
don't.
would be
you
I
don't
think
have to share anything.
What?
You don't have to share anything. That's your
Well, that's
opinion of what science is. My opinion of what science is actually get out there and make the stupid thing work. That moves science
Okay, well,
forward.
show us. I agree. So show us, does it work? Show us something that works then.
Okay, let me
beginning?
finish the question.
Yeah.
So Jack, you seem to be in a pontificating mood. If you can
I'm
speak
always in a
directly,
pontificating mood.
if you're constrained by any NDAs or things, please feel free to use a metaphor or a movie metaphor. But this perspective reality, and from someone who's been raised from the mainstream media, not quite aware of what's going out there. You began this call with saying, I've seen some stuff, and even the Pentagon's not totally clued in. You've spoken of conscious vapors in the sky, solid state devices, retrieved devices in the sky, potentially breakaway civilizations. The totality of all the paranormal that we're talking about, even Roswell. Like I went to Roswell and talked to the locals, and they all had an uncle or a dad or somebody saw it, touched it, whatever. Office of Global Access, that video going on about flight MH370s, the carrot derived PDF going around. And even the physics that's not accessible to mainstream academia here, even in Utah or Boston, anywhere I've been. Can you just pontificate on the scope of reality, starting with how I would start understanding it, what the government may have, or what they're trying to do and why they're keeping it from us?
I mean, recently, just get the book recently to begin. If you don't know nothing, a popular book, you don't have to really know too much. David Gladstone, it's on Amazon.com. What is it called? The Great Race by David Gladstone. Has a popular version of what I've been doing up until July, up until David Grush actually talks about it, up until David Grush's interview. So that's at least and and he talks a lot about paranormal stuff. He's a remote viewer, with Russell Targ, stuff like that. And he talks about mental time travel. But he also half the book is about what I've been doing, half the book is about what he's been doing. But it's you get like $10 or something like that. Get the Kindle, the ebook version, and that would I'd say start there.
All right. What do you know about, like, in the 1950s, that anti-gravity stuff that allegedly
it's mostly nothing really happened.
No, it wasn't taken.
I was around. I mean, I was at Cornell in the late 1950s with all these guys.
Yeah, back in the
Wheeler.
50s, it was mostly hype. It was, you had T.T. Brown, who was doing ionicraft. You had Dseversky and T.T. Brown,
which is not what I'm talking about.
And it got picked up by the news, and they didn't know the difference, and so it started hitting papers. And they said, "We've solved it," but they hadn't really solved anything.
That's correct.
And if I could jump in, Joseph, there's just as much hype today. I mean, there's definitely a lot going on. I would just take your time. Jack recommended The Great Race by David Gladstone. There are a lot of other resources out there. I would just try and maintain a well-grounded footing, and just
okay. Let me say something about this now. This is important. The physics is elementary. It's Einstein's general theory of relativity. So you have to understand is Einstein's gravity field equation. Just read Wikipedia, and then you have to read what I'm talking about, because the problem is solved. It's conceptually it's solved. It's like physics 101 almost. It's not a hard problem. The basic idea is very, very simple. The basic idea is that Einstein's field equation is you have a gravity field that's generated by a energy source, and there's a coefficient, a coupling that couples, say, the electromagnetic applied energy to the output gravity field. And the whole trick is to make that coupling stronger than people think is possible. And once you once you make
so
it
what
strong,
about the alien
home.
reproduction vehicles? And those are pretty strong, persistent rumors where those could fly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yes and no. But okay. Let me. This is something that I know. I have to be careful how much I say. That kind of vehicle is for real. The pictures of what was inside the vehicle are not real. Oh, what? It depends who.
The drawings, right?
Yeah. No. What Philip Corso says in his book, The Day After Roswell, that's real. What Richard Doty says about Cardinal 3, that's real. Up until a few months ago, I couldn't have said that, but now I've actually, I know that stuff is real, and that is the physics I'm talking about. In other words, when you go, if you read Corso's book and if you watch Rick Doty's video on Cardinal 3, it's a saucer. It looks like the ARV. On the outside, it looks like the ARV. It's a disc with like a dome on top, like that.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's about 30, maybe 35 feet in diameter, 30 feet, 32 feet in diameter. It only weighs 3,400 pounds or so. And if you calculate, that's very much less than the density of water. And if you're allowed to go inside, if it allows you, if the ship itself, if the conscious artificial intelligence inside the ship itself allows you to enter it, you will see exactly what Corso said. You will see an empty, pretty much empty space. You'll see 3 little seats for the little 3-foot android grays to sit in with four finger panels, control panels, which they control the ship. And then all the propulsion, all the power sources are in the very thin, maybe it's a centimeter thin. I don't know how thick the fuselage is, but it's it's a couple of centimeters at most. It's in this.
Is that one of those bismuth fuselages or something?
What?
The bismuth, is that what they use for the? Is that one of those ships?
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's the one thing that if Eric Davison put off. If that thing if bismuth may be involved. One thing about bismuth is that it's diamagnetic, and there's one calculation this guy Keith Wands has made. I don't know if it's correct or not because he never showed me the details of it, but he thinks that this S field that I have, that diamagnetism should amplify it quite a bit. And so, in other words, like a superconductor has like zero. In places zero magnetic permeability, and according to him, that should make a very big amplification effect, that the kind I'm talking about. So bismuth is like a clue. It's diamagnetic. The point is that these machines, these metasurfaces, these layered metasurfaces, they will only function when they're energized. They have to be energized by a power source.
All right. So I see like Salvador Pais, his patents, he's got like
forget that
stuff to break through it. Is that all garbage?
No, wrong. As soon as I hear Salvador Pais, I go crazy.
The Navy putting out patents. I mean, it seems a little
that's
too
bullshit.
good to be true, right?
It's all disinformation.
Okay.
Pais' stuff does not work. Okay. Now, I don't know if it's because the Navy is, for some reason, deliberately trying to mislead everybody, or if they're just incompetent, or for some combination of the two. And now I've seen Pais. Pais is a very nice man, okay? He's an engineer. He knows certain things, but he doesn't understand gravity at all. He doesn't understand textbook general relativity, Einstein physics. He doesn't understand it.
Okay. What is the Pentagon not know?
Now, let me finish because I know things you guys don't know. He may have been shown. I'm not sure. I'm speculating. Pais, because the Navy has these things. Okay, it shouldn't. The Navy has at least one functioning intact craft. U.S. Navy has.
All right.
Okay. Paez maybe has seen it. You know, Paez at best is kind of like Bob Lazar. I have no doubt that Bob Lazar saw what he said he saw at Area 51. And I have no doubt that maybe some of the things Bob Lazar says when he tries to explain it, he may have been told that at the time. But he's not a physicist, and the guys telling him that was just a cover story. Because I think what they were trying to do is get physicists like me to say, oh, this Bob Lazar, he's a liar. Because they didn't want people thinking about this for whatever reason, okay? They didn't want it disclosed. So Bob Lazar, I would say, yes, I think Bob Lazar basically is not lying when he said he was there and he saw this stuff. I think he did. But his explanation of it is, some of what he says is sort of okay, but then he goes off into, you know, silly stuff, the element 115, and, you know, it's just bullshit. Okay, so it's a mixed bag. You know, what is disinformation? Disinformation is truth wrapped in a bodyguard of lies. Okay, so you have to sort of, it's a complex.
Yeah, I mean, he knew enough to bring his friends to go view the craft. So, like, some part of his story I trust, but
and also,
what does the Pentagon not know?
Okay, let me stick on first.
Okay, I listen.
Okay, so Paez may have been shown. See, what he wanted to do, it said, when he talks about underwater craft, transmedium, yeah, that's all true. That's all true. But his explanation, his machines are not going to do what he says it's going to do. Okay. So that's why I think he knows, he's seen certain classified things that are similar to what I've seen. Okay. But his explanation of them are, you know, it's stupid. It's you know, any physicist, even Eric Davis agrees with me on that. Any physicist who knows certain minimum amount of general relativity and quantum mechanics is going to tell right away that it's bullshit.
Yeah, well, now, if it's okay, I mean, I'd like to go to Daniel Davis, if that's okay.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Joseph. And Daniel, you had another question, sir?
All right, sorry, I would forgive the preamble. Just bear with me. I wasn't expecting to run into Mr. Sarfatti here. But I've been reading some of your work recently. On like the low energy warp drive and stuff, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, and this might answer some of the other people's questions about the low energy. So just bear with me on the preamble for a second. When speaking in general relativity terms, you know with the Einstein metric, you have the G mu nu equals 8 pi g divided by c to the 4th. That's your space-time metric and your stress energy tensor. Let's just dumb this down to special relativity for ease sake. Normally, in special relativity's sake, you have a budget. C stays constant, and then you divide that between your velocity in space and your velocity in time. So my question to you, Mr. Sarfatti, is what you're doing to get the low energies, are you turning C into a variable to change the S&T side?
Roughly speaking, the answer is yes.
Okay.
But it's not C itself that changes. C stays the same. It's what's called, if you want, you know, it's like index of, again, it's like the index of refraction is changing. The C itself doesn't change, but the index of refraction changes because it's inside the material. And then again, it's not quite the index of refraction because the index of refraction is only for light waves. You have to know the difference between a near field and a far field. The warp drive is a near field thing. So it's not the index. It's something. It's something called the susceptibility. It's physically what it is.
So you like changing the permeativity of space-time?
What?
Are you like changing space-time's permeativity?
Yeah.
No, no.
Jack, sorry. I think that the difference is the metamaterials part. I think that's the part that.
Okay.
Let
me explain. I was about to explain it, but you guys, you know, keep interrupting me. I was about to explain it. Okay. Let me first explain what is the speed of light. Do you know what light is? First, what is light and vacuum? What is it? What is it physically?
The speed of information.
No, okay, that's a rhetorical question. You just keep quiet. I'll tell you when you can talk. Okay, I'm now giving the Sarfatti lecture. Okay, on light. What's the nature of light? Listen, first of all, Einstein is working on general relativity in 1915. Okay, there was no quantum mechanics then. there was classical electromagnetism, and there was the beginning of quantum mechanics. There was the photoelectric effect, which Einstein did himself. There was the Bohr theory of the atom, but they didn't really have a good understanding. When Einstein wrote his equation, C was just a parameter. I mean, C. What was C? C was stuff that the optical physicists measured, the speed of light in vacuum. And there was all kinds of optical measurements. Already like 100 years ago, maybe 200 years. When did they first measure the speed of light? I forget. I think in the 18th century, I think was measured. So he knew it was a parameter. Okay, and then so he has his equation. He has the equation after 10 years of struggle. He has the equation. And he has to make sure his equation corresponds to Newton's what's called the Poisson equation, field equation. And in order to get his tensor equation in the weak field limit, and when things are moving slowly in the non-relativistic limit, he just fit it to Newton's thing, and he finds that in order for him to agree with Newtonian gravity and all the measurements that are known, then if he puts in the speed of light in vacuum with the Newton's gravity constant, it's g over c to the fourth power, right? When he puts that in, he gets the right answers. Things agree with experiment. So it's kind of empirical. You understand? It was just like black box engineering. So it's empirical. He's fitting curves, fitting data. Okay, and it's a consistent picture. So it was not very profound what he did there. I mean, the equation is profound, but getting the right coefficient, the number, putting in the numbers for the coefficient was partly just to get agreement with observation, which is, that's good science. That's what scientists do. All right. Years go by, and now we have what's called quantum electrodynamics. Richard Feynman, Schwinger, Tominaga, all these guys. Okay. Now we understand what the speed of light is in terms of quantum electrodynamics. Basically, roughly speaking, to the first approximation, why is the speed of light 186,000 miles a second? Why is it that? Why isn't it 10 miles a second? Okay, well, there's now a mechanism. It's understood. You have to look at the quantum vacuum. The quantum vacuum is a plasma. It's the first approximation. I'm giving the most important part of it. There are other parts too. It's an electron-positron plasma. I call it virtual electron-positron plasma. Okay, and what happens is a real photon scatters off these electron-positron pairs, and that interaction, it's the vacuum itself has an index of refraction. A photon gets absorbed by an electron-positron pair, and then a short time later, it gets re-emitted. And when you do the calculation, there's some French guys they actually did a calculation. You can, using parameters of, you get a self-consistent picture that the point is that the speed of light, okay, this is what's about. The actual number for the speed of light, as say 300 million meters per second, is simply an emergent, contingent, dynamical quantity depending on the structure of the density of that a virtual electron-positron plasma. It's a dynamical effect. It's like plasma physics, but inside the vacuum. It's quantum mechanical plasma physics inside the vacuum. Okay, now you take that same approach, and instead of now the photon is going through material, and the material has real electric charges, and has both negative, positive charges like ions, a crystal lattice. It's electrically neutral. It has the free electrons, the bound electrons, and the ionic lattice, stuff like that. And you do the same calculations. You do the same kind of calculations. You calculate what's called the index of refraction. There's a whole cottage industry and physicists who did this, and then so you see the light slows down. So the point is this: the mechanism for the scattering of light in materials with real charges is essentially not very different from the mechanism for the propagation of light in the vacuum from virtual charges. So now the thing is this: so when Einstein writes his field equation and he uses the speed of light in vacuum, why should the speed of light in vacuum work inside the matter? Why should it be the speed of light inside the matter that works? Okay, from the microscopic, from the quantum mechanical point of view, it shouldn't be the speed of light in vacuum at all. Also, all the tests, all the experimental tests of relativity are not done inside matter. They're done in vacuum, where G over C to the fourth is not directly measured. So all the classic, with the gravitational bending of light, those are all basically, the space tests done in vacuum. And even all the tests, even the replica pound experiment. If you read the review articles on the experimental tests of relativity, there's no direct testing of Einstein's field equation for inside matter. Not really, and especially when the matter has what's called dispersion, which metamaterials have. Especially when the speed of light. There's another thing. Suppose it's dispersion. Suppose the speed of light depends on the frequency of the light in a given frame of reference. So what do you use in Einstein's equation? What C do you put in the denominator? What do you do? Okay, so there's that. So the point is that the conceptual foundation for people's belief in that particular coefficient inside matter is founded on nothing. It's shaky ground. It's all bullshit. It's not. There's been no direct experiments. Okay, and now what we do have experiment. The experiment we have the observations of the Tic Tacs. So the Tic Tacs are showing us that warp drive is real, and the only way warp drive can be real is for this effective speed of light in the denominator, the coupling, to get very small in effect. I've oversimplified because it's not the light waves, it's the near field. It's like the Coulomb field. So what you have is, if you do basic physics, you have what's called electromagnetic susceptibility functions. They are, if you send an electromagnetic field into material, and by the way, it doesn't have to be a wave. It could be like it could be a static field. It could be like a voltage from a battery. That's an induction field, not a radiation field. An induction field, like in the Tesla battery. Those are induction fields. They're not radiation. Okay, and so if you just take an electrostatic field, and put it inside the metamaterial, the electrostatic field is going to distort. It's going to separate the positive from the negative charges. That's called polarization, dielectric polarization. Okay, and what you're talking about, the static electromagnetic field, the near field, was going to generate, through Einstein's equation, a static gravitational field. Not going to be a gravitational wave. I'm not talking about waves anymore. Okay.
Fields.
Okay. The Earth's gravitational field is a static field, or quasi-static. It doesn't change very much. It changes very slowly, right? It's a near field. Okay. The mathematics of the near field is different from the mathematics of the far field. They're related. The near field at a certain limit becomes a far field. Technically, you have to go to what's called the Feynman propagator, and you look at the Feynman propagator in the complex energy plane, and the propagator has poles in the sense of complex variable theory. And when you approach the pole, a virtual photon becomes a real photon. Okay, this is all, you have to read Richard Feynman, you have to understand Feynman diagrams, all that kind of stuff. But physicists, this is the way physicists think. Okay, so we understand this, but we have a technical language, just like doctors have a technical language. You have to speak the language.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So the point is, basically, all this is very simple, and it leads to, the point is that Einstein's general relativity inside matter is not a well-developed field yet, and that's what's and the technology, the reverse engineering. Okay. Let me summarize. The reverse engineering of these UFOs is simply an applied physics problem of modifying Einstein's field equations inside the metamaterial condensed matter physics. So it involves a combination of quantum mechanics and metamaterials and something called non-equilibrium thermodynamics and relativity, and how to do that, to put it together. We basically sort of know how to do it. But that's it's just an applied physics problem now. There's
So if
no
we're doing this,
fundamental mystery. Okay.
if we're doing this applied physics thing with Einstein's equation, if we're doing this breakdown of Einstein's, so I like that we're playing with the scalar constant here. Your big G divided by c to the fourth. So does Einstein stay? Do the equations stay consistent if we apply a dimensional analysis to them, and then we take the G divided by c to the fourth? If we flip that over and make it a c to the fourth divided by G and stick it over on the G mu side?
Sure. Yeah, right, yes.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay, so that speaks to Pice work. Okay, interesting.
Okay, but since you seem to know a little, what we do, we have to work in Fourier transform space.
Okay.
We do have to do the Fourier transform. Now, in a strong gravitational field where space-time is curved, that becomes a problem, because in order to do Fourier transforms, you really can't have too much gravity. It has to be pretty much flat, because you take a Fourier transform, you integrate over all space and over all time to get sharp frequencies, I guess. But in curved space-time, you have to use what are called wavelets, scale-dependent, a more general concept than the Fourier transform. So the Fourier transform is just the first approximation. There's a guy in Moscow called Mikhail Altaysky, and he has now updated all of this general relativity, quantum field theory, using these generalized wavelet scale-dependent transforms, which we can apply for strong gravitational field problems. So that is a technical problem. So the point is, what you want to do, roughly speaking, you take the Fourier transform of Einstein's space-time equation. Well, what you really want to do is do what's called like a fast Fourier transform. We have a phase space, we have both position and wavelength, and also time and frequency, subject to the uncertainty principle, something like that. So you want to do like fast Fourier transform analysis, so you kind of know where you are and what frequencies you're interested in, okay? And but what you want to do is you only want to compute the gravity field at long wavelengths and low frequencies, okay? And that will depend upon the metamaterial response function or susceptibility, also at long wavelengths and low frequencies. And that you have to apply a voltage. You just apply a voltage, slowly varying voltage, that sort of thing. It's like circuit theory.
Mm-hmm.
It's like LCR circuits, stuff like that. And maybe you have so you can start. It's basically electrical engineering. It's like power systems electrical engineering, the actual description of the device. So what you have is your metamaterial, the fuselage itself. Think of the fuselage. It's a bunch of little what are called artificial atoms arranged in a lattice, right? Each little artificial atom can be viewed as a tiny little circuit. It's like a tiny. Think of it actually what it's going to be. You can model it, and people have actually been doing this. You can model each meta atom as a anharmonic dissipative forced oscillator circuit. Do you see here? Do you get that? Anharmonic. It's nonlinear, so it's going to be a nonlinear oscillator.
So it's going to be a curve.
Yeah. With some resistance, dissipation, a little dissipation, and an inductance and a capacitance. You have a capacitance, a magnetic inductance, a resistance, and some nonlinearity, and a driving force. That's each meta atom. Each node in the lattice is that, but then they're coupled together. So if you're like a network, it's coupled oscillators. It's like that, it's like the electric grid with all these power stations, okay? But on a micro scale, on a nanoscale even. So that's what the metasurface is. It gets complicated. So but that's basically it. That's basically what the physics is.
And see, you talk about working in curved space-time instead of flat space-time. So should I be more focused on de Sitter space or anti-de-Sitter space?
No, forget that. That's irrelevant. No,
okay.
You see, you made a mistake there, because first, de Sitter space, that's cosmology. That's on a scale where a galaxy is a point. I'm talking about nanometers.
Oh,
So
I just meant when I'm playing with the equations, like what should I be more focused on, de Sitter or anti-de Sitter, or just keep playing
no,
in
no, no,
Minkowski?
no. What you want to do is actually read my stuff. Just start reading my
Just to
stuff.
keep going
I
on your
put
stuff.
on
Okay, I'll keep
Twitter.
reading.
I just want on Twitter. I put everything on my Twitter feed, and I post the links and stuff like that. But the thing is this: what do I want to say about it? Okay, the place if you want to start, you have to read Feynman's lectures on gravitation.
Okay.
Caltech, 1962, I think. It's still the best place to go. And what I'm doing, I'm just applying Feynman diagram technique to this problem. Okay, because it's clear he could do dispersion, he could do everything. In Feynman, gravity is simply what's called a spin-2 tensor field. He does it against, he starts off with there's no gravity. He starts with just special relativity. There's no gravity. What's called globally flat space-time. You have a small perturbation. It's a spin-2 tensor field, and then when you add a bunch of these things up in an infinite series, you get Einstein's general relativity. So he gets to that, look good. But the point is, a lot of the flight of these UFOs in the atmosphere, the stuff that the Navy is seeing, it's weak gravity theory. So Feynman's approach, Feynman's perturbation theory, I think should work pretty well to describe the actual physics problem that we have, trying to explain to Commander Fravor and Ryan Graves how these things work. I can do it, I think, in terms of Feynman diagrams at very low order, fairly simple calculations. So that's what I'm working on now. But the point is, there's no mystery to any of this. Has nothing to do with Salvador Paez. Has nothing to do with element 115. What else? Also, all the other has nothing to do. Well, the 0-point energy may play a role, but that's not that important. It has nothing to do with levitation. It does have to do with superconductors, but they're special kind. They're room temperature superconductors called Froelich condensates. But that's another thing. So the point is, we have many of the key pieces of the puzzle. We have the main pieces of the puzzle, and there are just a few small pieces that, we're now at the mop-up phase. We understand the basic problem.
Jeremy, did you have a quick question?
Yeah, is my thing working or am I still breaking up?
Yeah, no, you're fine. What's your question?
Okay, so like I know Jack is not he told me he's not an engineer, he's a physicist. But when you mentioned the wavelet, that's like a more general form of the wave Fourier transform, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so like when the troughs and the peaks, or peaks that go up and the troughs, so when they align on certain, like I'm looking at the waveform going up and down, and I guess when certain ones align and I guess becomes superposition, that's what makes a superconductor, right? If more of them align on the same timing.
No. Super. No, I don't know what you're talking. No, you're no. As Wolfgang Paul would say, you're not even wrong. Listen, if you want to learn about superconductivity, just go to Wikipedia. There is the BCS theory. What happens is superconductor, at least the regular superconductors, not the new ones. The regular ones, you have what's called electron-phonon interaction, and the two electrons get bound together by exchanging a virtual phonon, and they form a entangled pair, what's called opposite spins, opposite momenta, and then an electron's a fermion, obeys the Pauli exclusion principle, but when you stick two of them together, you can get a spin 1 particle or spin 0 particle, and those are bosons, and those can form the condensate, the giant quantum coherent phase, and that's a superconductor. Okay, it has nothing to do with the waveform. I don't know what you're talking about with Fourier transforms. Yeah, I mean that's it's apples and I mean you're totally confused on that. But if you want to learn what a superconductor is, just get a textbook or just go ask ChatGPT now. Ask the artificial intelligence. They'll explain it to you. There's no reason not to understand basics.
Okay,
that's true.
Jeremy,
Thank you.
Thank you. Yep. Let me go to Jared next. Jared, go for it.
So Jack, we're talking negative susceptance, negative susceptibility. Bismuth is 10 to the -5. Superconductor's theoretical limit is -1/3, but split ring resonators are orders of magnitude better than superconductors.
Oh, really? Okay. So what? Okay. Go slower. Wait, slow down. That's interesting. Slow down. Are you saying that the magnetic permeability, relative permeability of bismuth is 10 to the -5? Is that what you said?
Yeah, it's very, very small. It's weird that was found in some.
Okay, wait. Hang on a minute. So if it's 10 to the -5, let me just stop. According to Keith Wanzer, that would amplify, the S would be 10 to the 10. So it'd be, 10 billion times stronger. In other words, instead of 10 to the -43 reciprocal newtons, it'll be 10 to the -33. But you amplify by 10 billion with that permeability, according to his equation. If he's right about that, but I don't know if he's right, because for some strange reason he never published how he got that. See, let me explain something. Let me give you a little history about that. About 12 years ago, I gave a talk at a DARPA NASA meeting in which I was the first one to say flying UFOs are warp drive vehicles using metamaterials as the fuselage. Okay. And but in there I had like the S field. In there I had, because I was making an analogy with index of refraction, there I had that the S field, the amplification, should be the square of the relative electric permittivity multiplied by the square of the relative magnetic permeability. Okay, so but then I won't go through all the details. Then we did, we were looking at some other paper. There's some guys in Venezuela, Medina Stephanie, and we had to make everything relativistically invariant, covariant, symmetry. And then it was fairly complicated. And Keith Wanzer, who's a professor at Fullerton, along with Jim Woodward, they're in the same faculty there. He said that he got this term one over the reciprocal. In other words, it was E squared. It was the square of the dielectric permittivity plus 1 over the square of the magnetic permeability. So it's in the denominator there. That's the diamagnetic effect. Okay, all right. Now you had more to say. Go ahead. So now you had more to add. Now add the other stuff.
Yeah. So it was a two-parter. So I'm really glad that you addressed that, because that explains a ton. I was thinking split ring resonators because that's metamaterial, and this negative susceptance can go really high. But if you actually want it to be negative susceptance really small, like bismuth, that makes a lot more sense. So the other part is, since we're dealing,
that's if he's correct. I hope he's correct. Basically, I'm just saying what he told me. I don't have the proof of it. I didn't derive it myself. It may or may not be correct. I hope it's correct.
Fingers crossed. So the second part, though, is since we're dealing with particle antiparticle pairs in solids, then we're dealing with the twisted Schwinger effect, which is a really relatively recent thing that's only been out the last, I don't know, half a decade to a decade, where they're figuring out that you can actually, rather than just splat the laser onto the material, you have a very high twist onto that laser, and that added angular momentum helps focus the laser down farther or something like that.
Okay, are you talking about Ray Chow? Ray Chow's work on twisted?
I don't think it was Ray Chow. I will email you a couple of papers, but one of the most recent papers is like a book of 138 pages. It's most comprehensive, and it was in April of this year.
All right, just tell me, what is the actual physical situation?
So the gist is, unlike the regular Schwinger effect in vacuum, you're doing it in a solid. So now you already have changed, your medium, and then on top of that, because now you've added a rotational angular element to the laser beam. Right now, you're getting even higher energy densities in that little tiny spot there. So the idea
is he trying to do the Schwinger limit?
So the theoretical limit, from what I've been able to understand, is that I'm trying to remember, magnesium oxide. I forget what exactly the material was. Magnesium silicon. Anyways, in the material, they're calculating it now to where it's 2 × 10⁹ volts per meter, and that they can achieve this with some attosecond lasers. They got some higher terahertz lasers out there now that are making this experimentally feasible.
Terahertz, that's interesting. Yeah. So all right. Oh yeah, but okay, I'd have to see. I don't quite see how, because of course, in the Tic Tacs and the machines, they don't have any, obvious lasers or any high energy. It's all,
no,
it's all being,
the
yeah.
MUFON 74282, most famous UFO sighting in MUFON history, was a hunter who was this super dark project engineer who went hunting up in Canada, and he saw this barbell. It's called the barbell UFO. And on both ends, he saw lights coming around, and he said that it kind of felt salty to his eyes, and he took his camera and he got video of it, but the camera, it destroyed the video, and then he went and he analyzed the video with all of his equipment, and he was able to discern that there was information encoded in these multicolored laser beams coming off of this thing, and he since got
that could be, but that may not be the propulsion. Yeah, I mean, I have no doubt about that, but that doesn't mean it's being propelled by that.
No.
Yeah,
they use lasers in most of their scanning stuff. So there's videos out there where it's got a very slow twist scanning laser beam that comes down over wherever they're scanning.
Well, okay, let me tell you something about the weapon system that I sort of know about the weapons that these things have. They have what Matt Visser, who's a physicist in New Zealand, he's very good. He's published a paper. There are 3 kinds of gravity beam weapons. You can have what's called a pressor beam. It's just like a pressure beam. You have a tractor beam, where you see where the UFO lifts the cars and the people, like the Rapture. And you have what's called a stressor beam, which is what's called a wild tensor. It's a stretch squeeze thing. Now, I happen to know that there have been incidents with in which a saucer coming out of the water, a USO actually shot a beam at a Navy ship, and it was a stressor beam where you just sort of like, do you ever see like Aurigema, where they twist the metal, begins to twist like stretch squeeze. It starts twisting, okay, and they didn't sink the saucer didn't sink the ship. It just it was like a warning, literally a warning shot across the bow. Don't fuck with us, okay. So there's that kind of weapon. Then there's also a defensive weapon. I call it the white hole shield. This guy, Julien Gaffray, this French kid, has made a little video animation of it, where if you shoot a missile at this thing, they can activate it's like a white hole. You actually make what's called, it's like a white hole event horizon inside the material of the ship, which means it's like nothing can get through it. And not even a nuclear blast will get through it. It might even, well, it depends, but it might even protect against a nuclear bomb. Okay. And there have been, I've been told, just this is anecdotal. I can't, I can't confirm with 100% probability, but I've been told that there have been attempts to shoot down some of these machines, and the missiles just bounce right out. They bounce right back. There's evidence for the force shield. Now, of course, since these things are time travel machines, there are many different machines at different levels of technology, and some of them we do shoot down. They come from more primitive time travel, like the Roswell thing. So sometimes they crash. So just like we have a Wright-Patterson, the Wright brothers plane, we have the biplanes of World War I, World War II, and now with the F-35s, there are different levels of technology, even in these visitors, in these NHI machines. There are different kinds. They're coming from different time periods.
Do you have any additional information on that ship that got stressor beamed, so we could look at more info on it somewhere else?
I shouldn't even said that because it's classified.
I didn't hear nothing.
I know you didn't. Yeah, but the thing, I cannot tell you where. I cannot tell you when. I cannot tell you which Navy it was. Well, all that stuff. I can't reveal that. But I have it from a very good source. I mean, I believe it with 90, 95, 98%, 99% probable confidence level, because of the source is very reliable.
Okay. Well, guys, on that note, Jack, let me thank you so much for your time. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
So, let me see. I think that we're going to go to Curtis Horn.
So yeah, I just have a short update at the lab. We did have an issue with the turbo pump, and over the holiday break, it apparently, I guess there was a power outage or something, and somehow the I don't know if it restarted on full atmosphere or what happened, but when we got back, it was not running. So right now we're dealing with having to. We still have a vacuum that's like about 5 millitorr, yeah, we're trying to find a replacement for that turbo pump, and I guess it was purchased by Hal Fern. I'm not sure how many years ago, but Hal had gotten it for like $60 on eBay or something. So I guess we got our money's worth. So that's where we're at right now with the lab. We're in terms of like what we're doing with the drive. We're working on narrowing down the frequency range and kind of doing a sweep where we get the effect. And unfortunately, the device that's in there, it had some stiction to it. So Jim and I were at the lab today. I think earlier we hopped in briefly. Basically, Jim's has one outside that he's gonna refurbish, and we're gonna be putting that back in. So hopefully, we'll get less problems with the stiction that's there. Because when the stiction is, like, from what I can tell, what's happening is there's a little bit of stick slip with the and it's transient. It comes in and out, and so it kind of like hides the effect. So we're trying to get a device that like smoothly moves. So that's still in the process. We did also repair the calibrator circuit today. And we're going to be also putting in the null drive. I call it null drive, but basically has the same mass on either side. So that's still in progress for that. The only other thing I have is that if you guys have any questions for me in terms of like the stuff, the theory stuff I covered last time, the background pairs. I've gotten some questions for the next presentation, which is like diving more into the background pairs and what that means. And so that's what I'm going to be working on. I'm also going to be working on that quaternion formulation of electromagnetism, a little bit of that. And I have not made much. I made some progress in terms of like putting all the computations out. One of the things I'd like to, like I said, I'd like to put a website where I can put either Python or Mathematica, all the code there, so anyone can like get it and do their own computations for this stuff. So I'm still working on that and getting that done. That's about it. So if anyone has any questions for me, or like I said, or anything they want me to cover from Sax's theory, just let me know. And one last thing I want to say, that I find it very interesting that, the stuff Jack talked about, he mentioned the whole background pairs or the particle antiparticle pairs. Last time in my talk, I brought up the Brett Wheeler process as a possible mechanism, where you're splitting up background pairs and that could be a mechanism for lowering inertial mass. So it seems like a lot of these theories have a convergence. I was talking to another fellow that he was using some kind of a fifth dimensional thing with a different theory, kind of a string theory variant, and he ended up with the same kind of hypothesis of a particle antiparticle pairs being split up. So I find it interesting. A lot of these different approaches are kind of converging on the same effect, and that we see that effect from these reports. The radiation is something that's reported, which is interesting. So anyway, that's all I have.
Curtis, thank you, sir. Thank you. Okay. Anyhow, Bill, you had your hand raised. Do you have a question for Curtis? Oh, sorry. Okay, go for it, Bill.
Okay, am I on?
Yeah.
Can you hear me, Tim?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, did we lose Jack? Did he?
I think Jack took off. I think he realized that he had dominated our conversation.
Well, I wanted to pass some information along, maybe even to the group here. I've had a couple of encounters with the ETs, and they call themselves the Galactic Federation. Okay, this particular group of extraterrestrials are in guardian action over the Earth. And the interaction that I had with them was that we were being followed by agents of the US government. I don't know if they're CIA, FBI, monitoring us, my wife and I. And we were being followed in our vehicle. This was in Phoenix. This was a couple of years ago. And this also happened to my wife a number of years ago. And there were some witnesses with this. And they had this advanced technology. And I wanted to pass this on to Jack about teleportation, that they have this teleportation technology. And they were able to literally teleport my vehicle with us in it to another place in Phoenix. We're traveling to our storage locker in Phoenix, and they literally teleported us. And it's like all of a sudden we found ourselves on another street. Okay, that's the kind of technology they have, is this teleportation. And I was wondering if Jack had any information on this, or what he's working on with teleportation technology that these extraterrestrials have. And my wife had an interaction a number of years ago with Alfred Weber, who was also a radio host. And they were also teleported in, they're traveling in a vehicle in New York City, and they were teleported as well. Now, I felt no sensation, nothing, except that all of a sudden we're just on another street traveling in this vehicle. So I just wanted to pass this on to Jack if he's doing anything with this or heard of this teleportation technology. So that's just what I wanted to pass on here. So that's pretty much all that I have to say for right now.
Thank you. Let me go back to Drew. And I mean, guys, if we're moving, I mean, do you want to just kind of open things up and we don't have to raise hands anymore? I think we're kind of in an open mic type situation. Do you want to just do that? Drew, do you want to go next?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure how to lower my hand now.
Oh yeah, no, I'll just lower them all.
I just wanted to
be open mic.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to shift.
Is...
different direction. I have discovered once again that talking about propulsion that isn't in the mainstream, and by mainstream, I'm a professional rocket engineer. I am a fluids engineer for the U.S. manned space, U.S. crewed space program. 35 years in the game, and standard propulsion is hypergalls, pressurized gases, cold gas. Now the mainstream has gotten into the electrostatic or the electric propulsion, which is just electrics over, ion. Basically, you're just using electric energy to accelerate a gas. That's the standard stuff. If you deviate from talking about that, if you deviate from talking about any of the accepted forms of propulsion, it is a career killer, period. That has been my observation, and I've been in 5 or 6 major space programs. I currently work for one of them that ain't SpaceX. And I'm here to tell you, it doesn't matter how smart you think you are, if talk at all, though we do forum, to anyone other than someone on this forum, you are immediately put into the box of crazy people and ignored. So I don't know if anyone else has had this experience in their professional career, but it is absolutely a career killer. It is a integrity killer. It is a ever being listened to again realistically killer. That's been my observation of talking about any variation from the norm. So I just wanted to throw that out there and see if anybody else has a comment on that.
I have
So I
something to
think-
say about that because I agree strongly. And actually, this is why when I left my full-time job and I started helping Jim out, you know, and they had the experiment in the air, I was a really loud voice saying, we got to get this back in the vacuum. We got to start doing real things and taking into account real, you know, engineering effects. And, you know, the way that had happened is Jim and Hal had the experiment in the chamber. They filled the chamber with air and it looked like the thing was behaving the same. So they reasoned there was no difference, but there was a huge difference. Once you had baffles off, the thing would, you know, was basically pumping air out. We did even have a COMSOL simulation that shows that in the air, it can produce up to a Newton of force, which is a lot for a little device. Yeah. And that's air. Okay, that's not going to work in space. That's not what we're trying to do here, right? So you know that is, you know, you might have some setbacks, but you got to stick to conventional and accept conventional physics. So, for example, what I mean by that is like, you know, if there's air, you know, and there could be an air effect, hey, you know, you gotta say, you can't rule it out unless there's, you know, a really hard vacuum, right? And if you're doing anything with electromagnetism involved, there could be some kind of, you know, Bohm-Abraham type of effect that you know, it could be a potential effect. So it's really hard to like rule these things out. And I think shouting down the skeptics that bring those things up is not the way to go. Is probably just saying, hey, you know, we're eliminating, you know, there's ways of experimentally eliminating those kind of things or reducing the likelihood. And ultimately, you know, when a drive gets put in space, even then, right, because there's magnetic fields flying around out there, you know, maybe that's what it is. But at that point, if the thing works and it's going, and sure, it may end up being it's pushing against a magnetic field, but so what? If the thing works, we got something, right? So I think that's a very valid point about, you know, being very cautious about like what, you know, okay, we're trying these things, but if you have a career or something that where people depend on you and they want to know that you know what you're doing, right? If you're doing something where people's safety involved and serious things, you know, this could be a hobby, but yeah, take it seriously what you do.
I have a question for you, Curtis, on what you just said a while back, that you see 1 Newton in air, and that's not in space. So I'm curious on the reasons for that, because as much as I understand Mach effect thruster, it is gravity based, correct?
No. What I'm saying is that the model was done with air around it. And the air pushes on the device if you have it in air. So
why? Because of the gravity of the air?
Because,
like,
no,
I'm just trying to
because
understand more.
Because the Mach effect drive has a aluminum plate and a brass plate, and
Right.
so you get vibrations, and when you get things vibrating in air, you can get like kind of
okay. So then you're getting some kind of ionic push then.
Yeah, you're pushing the air away.
Okay, it's not the Mach effect anymore there.
No, that COMSOL doesn't have the Mach effect built in. The COMSOL simulation is standard physics. Okay, it's a multi-physics simulation that'll give you what the air will do. You know,
so that's fine. I thought there was something else
I warn against doing the experiment in air, because if you do it in air, you have that effect. That effect will happen in an atmosphere.
So that's an aberration then. It doesn't contribute to the main Mach effect gravitational basis, correct?
Right. So that'll give you false positives or false negatives. So that's why the experiment is back in the vacuum, therefore.
so just taking this into the second question, once we are in like real space, right? Not a vacuum chamber, then we would have material there, right? I mean, how light it is, you're going to have radiation, you're going to have particles hitting it. So what would be the effect then?
Well, the vacuum in space, depending how far away from your Earth you are, is going to be probably stronger than the vacuum that we have. So inside the vessel, you would expect that whatever this is in, you would expect that, we would build it in a way where, the gases that were there, because, you have gas around it until you launch up there, that we would all release it all, because that's just going to be, mucking up the system. So out there, you would expect these drives, let's say they do end up working the way we think they should. You would have these drives in an engineered environment. So if they needed shielding, you would provide shielding. If they needed cooling, you would provide cooling in some way. So you'd probably want to engineer them in a way where, they would survive the duty cycle that you want.
Oh, yeah.
Working drive.
Yeah.
But here on Earth, of course, we have shielding from radiation. I don't see necessarily that the radiation would do much to this. The materials are pretty hardy. It's brass and ceramics and stuff like that. So
yeah. For here it's good. Yeah, I understand. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Yeah, I was just curious. Yeah.
So I think to build off Andrew's point on sort of like the destigmatization around alternative propulsion systems, there's a couple ways we can approach this problem. First on the preamble of this, I'm all in on the warp drive idea. Now, which version of the warp drive? That's where the devils are in the details, right? I think we need to start treating at least some version of the warp drive as more of like a prediction of general relativity. Than we do like some woo space-time Star Trek thing. I think that'll help a bit for getting this farther in the academic world. On top of that, at least so like going off the traditional Alcubierre metric, there's like about a half dozen problems that are traditionally associated with this. You have the negative mass problem, you have the enormous amount of energies, causality problems, the horizon problem. There are papers subsequent after Alcubierre that individually solve each of these problems, but none of these people are talking to each other. And so what needs to happen, and I think Tim is in a very good position to do this with his connections in this field, is we need to get some of these people talking together, and we need to come up with a more unified warp drive approach than just the base Alcubierre paper that incorporates each of these different improvements upon the unphysicalities of the original one. And I guess we'll go off there.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. My thought on the stigma is, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, the world that we live in is full of discrimination, and that's what this is, right? And people in this conference have faced people that I know, people who are friends who have faced discrimination because they are into UFOs and they've talked about it publicly. Probably everyone here has faced at least raised eyebrows, if not outright discrimination, for working on, ideas that are propulsion that don't involve chemical rockets. I mean, I guess my thought would be just, hang in there. And, one of the things for me is if people aren't into this area, I tend not to talk about it. If no other reason than because they won't get it. It'll go over their heads. Right. But, but I would say, look at what's going on with UFOs right now. It is going mainstream, and people who were once pariahs are on their way to becoming rock stars, right? I mean, you look at like Lou Elizondo and folks like that. So, I think the same thing will happen here. I mean, this technology is the next step, right? Chemical rockets just can't do it. It just won't happen. So, if they want to get there, it's got to be this. And the other thing I should mention was I had a really interesting conversation with Greg Mahalik the other day, who's working on nuclear space propulsion. And what he was saying was the weight and payload involved with nuclear propulsion in space fission and fusion drives may not be any better than chemical drives, at least not for a long time. And the reason was you get better propulsion, but the weight is so much higher that you end up with the same problems. So that doesn't really
Well,
solve
it's
any
still
of
a
our
reaction
problems.
mass drive. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, Tim, I think one of the
It
things
doesn't matter
with,
how much ISP you're going to get out of your rocket propulsion system if your rocket weighs 5,000 metric tons.
And that's what he was saying.
It doesn't matter.
That's what he was saying.
The tree huggers are never going to let you put a nuclear propulsion system in space. It got killed back before the tree huggers existed.
Fission ones, yeah.
They're just not going to let you do it. Okay, the whole NERVA thing, I've been following this for 40 years. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Fusion's always 10 years further away. I don't know when those guys are ever going to get caught on. But fission in space, they're never going to let you do it.
Well, so what he had expressed was right now the authority view, whatever you would call it, the prevailing wisdom is nuclear reactors for the moon, right? And that's something I know they can do those at scale. I've seen those like when I went to the STAFE conference.
Yeah.
You have little Stirling cycle engines. You've got plutonium that heats water. You can heat sink into the dirt, stuff like that. There are lots of ideas out there for generating energy from nuclear power. But in terms of nuclear drives, he was not nearly as optimistic as I thought he would have been. So again, that brings us back to this, right? It's the only game in town going forward.
Yeah, Tim.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought I'd step in here and say rockets, I hate to say that rockets are passé. Okay. You got to get into field propulsion. That's where the game is at. Not rockets. Let go of rockets, for God's sakes, because they're not using rockets. Okay? They're not. It's field propulsion. How does it work? I've been studying Tom Bearden for what, 25 years. 25 years. He left information out. The man wanted a DARPA contract. He never got it. He died a couple of years ago. Okay? The man had the answers. Okay? And a few months ago, and I even gave a lecture here on APEC, where I filled in the blanks. I filled in the Tom Bearden blanks. Okay? And he left those blanks deliberately. Even in his patent is BS. His patent is complete BS. Okay? That's not how the MEG worked. Okay? He even kept that out of the scene. Okay? The MEG and was presented by Jean-Louis Naudin, what, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, is garbage. That's not what happened, because Tom kept all that hidden. Okay? But if you go through all his material, you can dig it out and you can piece it together and figure it out.
Well,
okay?
Bill, if I could add this, so this surprised me. Let me add to this quickly. So Tom Bearden, there are a collection of people on both sides, right? The physics is right, the physics is wrong. As you've said, he left things out, the whole 9 yards. So David Chester actually got really excited, and he was chatting me. This was about 2 months ago, and he said that he came back to Tom Bearden's work through a completely different approach to physics. And he in the past, I mean, he wasn't outright dismissive of it, but he's like, maybe there's something really here, and this is why it would work. And it's from a complete. So one of the things that I found is, in terms of a lot of this, I try not to be dismissive, because stuff, it's almost what it reminds me of is like, I do photography as my hobby, right? And if you take something and you put a light on it from the front, it looks completely different than having a light on it from the side. And one of the things that I found is stuff that I would look at and go, no, that doesn't make any sense to me. There's no way that would work. You come back to it 2 years later and you learn something, and you have that light on the side or the light on the other side, and you're like, oh my God, I understand how this would work. And that's happened.
That same thing. Yep.
Yeah. I've had that happen so many times, right? That like, I try not to rule this stuff out, you know? And
yeah, well, the conclusion that I came to on this is something called the scalar wave. It's real. Okay, it's right there in relativistic quantum field theory. I don't know why Jack doesn't bring this up.
They're also on the non-heavy side version of Maxwell's equations.
Okay, yeah, it's right. It's not in heavy side at all. Okay, it's it goes back to much earlier than that. Okay, but it shows up in relativistic quantum field theory. Okay, you have this frequency squared term, okay, that shows up. And it turns out that this frequency squared term is your sine squared term. Well, what happens when you square a frequency? You get this polarized sine wave. Okay, it's a polarized sine wave. That is your scalar function. That's what we're working with here. And Tom Bearden always said that matter is made of light. Everything here is made of light. Okay, but then what Tom said was that matter is made of trapped electromagnetic energy. In other words, the particles to form an electron requires two frequencies of photons that are spinning together. Okay, they're spinning together, and that forms a gravitational function along with that. Now, if they're counter-rotating, okay, around each other, that is anti-gravitic. Okay, anti-gravitic. Well, what's anti-gravitic? What is that? Well, it first showed up in De Glocke. Probably everyone heard of the Nazi Bell device, De Glocke. They had counter-rotating, what are described as counter-rotating drums. Okay, when you take magnetism and counter-rotate it, creates this anti-gravitational function.
Are you inducing the Gartenstein effect?
And this is what Boyd Bushman spoke about with David Sereda in his video, was that he took two magnets and forced them together. In other words, they're of the same poles, okay? And when you do that, and you kind of wrap it up like a rock and you drop it, you find out that it's anti-gravitic. Now I reason that, well, okay, if he's doing opposing forces, what happens when you work with attractive forces, okay, and drop that magnet? Turns out that it drops faster than a rock, okay? So here you have a gravitic solution with magnets bending space-time. Jack doesn't talk about that at all. Magnets bend space-time. Okay, well, which direction do they bend space-time? Well, if it's attractive, you get this well, okay? If it's opposing, you get anti-gravitic, okay? Now, what does that mean? Oh, all of a sudden, I have an Alcubierre warp drive on my hands. So I can assemble these magnets, using magnets, a warp drive engine. Okay,
Can we go back to that for just a second?
That's the way it works. Okay, if you do the drop test.
Can we go back to that for just a second? Or where in all the literature, because I've looked extensively, did you find anything that said that magnetic fields can affect space-time?
Space-time, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
You keep saying yes.
I did the experiments.
I've looked very extensively, and I have not found a single article anywhere on anything that anybody that says that electrostatics can affect space-time or electromagnetics can affect space-time. Where do you have any evidence of this, or because I'm very excited about this?
Experiments. If you go to my Facebook or LinkedIn, you go to my site.
LinkedIn. As a communist, but
I posted a video where I replicated the Boyd Bushman experiment. I said, you know what, this guy's right. You know, with David Sereda. Okay, had an interview with Boyd Bushman
on dropping of magnets.
Yeah,
you timed them and.
If you take a spinning ball of steel and you spin at 20,000 RPM, it bends space-time with that. Bruce De Palma did that experiment. Okay, the brother of Brian De Palma, the famous director. Okay,
Could that be affected by ferromagnetic surfaces around the experiment, Earth's magnetic field, a lot of these things? I mean, the only way to really know for sure is to do it in a completely isolated environment in a Faraday cage or something like that, or something which just kind of shields all magnetic influence, and then do this.
That would be nice. I
Yeah,
mean, you
so
can
if
do
you
this
took this
experiment
ball,
probably at NASA.
hang on, if you took this ball and spun it in a high vacuum, I assume there's a magnet in the ball or something, but is it, if you spin this
That will
ball,
bend
it
space-time.
would theoretically alter space-time somewhere near the ball, out to some distance.
Actually, Drew, there are theories from
yes or no?
A few people who have proved that magnetic fields do warp space-time.
Yeah, so
so there's a field propulsion concept or theory from this guy called Minami, where he's talking about warping space-time with magnetic fields. Very high, massive magnetic fields, but it's theoretically possible, he says. You
Okay,
know.
because
who's here heard of the Gartenstein effect?
What's
Sonny
that?
White was playing around with all this nonsense years ago, and I think if it, because he had a little laser interferometer, and he had, you know, he was firing laser beams and checking for interference waves, and he was trying to screw up space-time with all kinds of different nonsense. None of that panned out. So this is the first time I've heard that somebody says you can take a magnetic something, spin it, or do whatever, and it affects space-time in a way that is measurable. I mean,
Andrew, have you heard of the Gartenstein effect?
No.
Okay, so the Gartenstein effect, it was predicted in 1961, I believe, by a guy named Gartenstein. Anyways, basically what he says is if you pass electromagnetic radiation through a sufficiently strong enough B fields, it'll convert the EM fields or it'll convert the electromagnetic radiation that you're passing through the field. It'll convert them into gravitational waves of the same frequency. Now, I don't think it's been experimentally confirmed yet because we don't have the proper gravitational wave detectors, but it is a field of theoretical physics. Now, as to what William's saying about the putting the two magnets in the ball and drop, I'm familiar with the testimony he's talking about. And I think to answer your question, yes, he is saying that if you take these two magnets, because you're having your EM fields on the surface of the magnet, if you spin it up to a high enough spin, they're saying that basically you will get like a gravitational wave off of it. Now I don't know how true that is, but that does speak similar to a little bit of what Pius was saying about accelerated frequencies and spins. He says it's easier to use frequency instead of spin, because Euler's formula, they're basically two sides of the same coin. The reason they were having issues getting the effects in the laboratory from the spin is because the RPMs required are so high that the centrifugal forces will cause the flywheel to, catastrophically fail. Which is why he was saying to use piezoelectrics instead of a spinning thing. Anyways, I'm digressing. Actually, I'm not digressing a little bit.
What was they measuring the signal or like the spin of the RPM as a some sort of waveform, or were they getting like dissipative effects in some of the signal?
See,
you would have to ask Pius.
See, and that goes back to what Mark Sokol is working on, because he's trying to align spins on an atomic scale, right? And so possibly, if there's a coupling there that spin can affect on that atomic scale, you've got that speed and things aren't going to fly apart. So that's, I mean, the physics isn't, I wouldn't say the physics is highly rigorous there, right? I mean, I'm sure Jack would probably tear that one apart,
Yeah.
most physicists would.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Did you catch my one question there with Sarfatti on the dimensional analysis? So I found it funny that he was saying he
I love dimensional
doesn't
analysis,
like Pius's work. Now that that specific dimensional analysis I gave him of putting the c to the fourth divided by g, attaching that to the g mu nu, that's exactly what Pice does for in his work to get for some of his effects. And I find it interesting that while Sarfatti says he detracts Pice for the most part, he basically confirmed, part of what Pice was doing when I basically just rephrased some of Pice's work back at him. That being said, I wonder if you'd be able to get them two to find some common ground between each other.
I think a lot of that comes down to personality issues, and that's not something I can solve. I mean,
yeah, fair enough.
And the same would go for like Hal and Eric, and they a lot of what they do to me is a lot of what they do seems very similar. But they're expressing it in different ways, right? And then sometimes they get hung up on the model, and
like he was saying, you kind of do have to have like a common language in this, which makes it hard for people who are not like in the academic world to be able to even talk about these things.
Yeah, but
well,
then
I have that book. Oh, it's blurred out here. So
Yes.
that Feynman lectures on gravitation. I have that. And if anyone gets it, get the 1995 version, because there's corrections that were done later. That anyway. So
thanks. I'd like to add to what Daniel Davis is saying as well, which is an extremely good point. What I've noticed is that you have sort of these two personality types where one of them wants to grab hold of an idea and try to find how their idea is uniquely isolated and separate from everyone else's, so they're going to poke holes in anything that might be similar. And then you have the other type, which is looking not to have been right or not to be right, but instead is more concerned with actually being correct in the end. And they find all the ways where their idea is very much like yours and like everybody else's in the past, and recognizes that they stand on the shoulders of giants. And so for those people who want to put their ideas together, what we found in our private think tanks, our groups, and our discussions, which have gone on for years now and have sometimes calls lasted over 8 hours, is we come out of that all being way smarter, way more educated, and in unison in our efforts, because we focus entirely on what parts of what we've discovered in our lives are compatible in these theories of new field physics and field propulsion. And that's been the unifying force, is finding the similarities. So I think, Jack is justified because he's an older guy. He's been doing this for super long, and for almost the entirety of his whole, para-professional career, dealing with this very much rejected area of physics, he's been rejected, and he's had to fight against the status quo of academia. So only now, recently, in the last several years, maybe the last half decade, has something like APEC existed as an open forum for these discussions. And I can't blame him for being a bit jaded and expecting the world to be exactly the same for these last 5 years as it has been for the entirety of the rest of the time before that. And I think at this point, he just wants to protect and establish his, his legacy in all the work that he's done too, and he's afraid of losing it.
Stay professional, you can't just curse, especially not Mark. So
I agree completely, and it's out of place, but it's sort of understandable. Where I think really Jack is quite amenable and easy to get along with, as long as he is perceiving that he's getting the recognition for all the effort that he put in when there was no support and when there was no other networks like this one. So if he gets what he sees as respect, then I think he's going to give it back, and otherwise you're going to be a schmuck.
Well, there's definitely a certain amount of tact that has to go.
I work with guys like him every day, literally, just like him every day. Professional scientists, professional engineers. I have never discovered that treating them with respect and honor does anything but bring out more ass in them. Not saying this guy is one, but I work with guys who are complete asses every day.
You're talking about
day.
rigidity, yeah.
When every compliment grows somebody's ego, especially those who are specifically seeking to be more arrogant and egotistical, you got to be kind of careful about how you say things, because they get to feel very special and feel like they're the only person in the world who's qualified to think their thoughts and do what they're doing, and that can be a really dangerous position for somebody's psychology. They get isolated from everybody else and try to protect their territory, if you will.
Let me express a thought though. Right now, that's like this week. This week, the U.S. Congress and Senate are having a fight about where they hid the UFOs. We are in weird territory. That's not I'm not making this up. I mean, that's the news, right?
Yeah.
They are literally having a fight about who's got the UFOs and how they can get them. You know,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, so I mean, we've kind of crossed the Rubicon. I have no idea where this is going, but like normal is like a long way in the rearview mirror.
So,
you
so I
know?
have something to say about this. That it's a opinion I have that I feel is like not a personal thing, not about people and but like when I first encountered Jack, and via the email list earlier this summer, my question to him was, okay, what is the fundamental idea of where you're expanding Einstein's general relativity? Because Einstein's general relativity has its limits, right? You got to throw in, okay, we're throwing in negative energy. Now we get a warp bubble. Okay, what's the justification of the negative energy?
You don't need a
There-
negative
there-
energy though.
You know, it's just like, okay, well, that's what we need to get that theory to do what we want to do. Now, this is where, you know, when I came back with Sachs's stuff, what Sachs did, and that's why I kind of like that theory, and I hold it as something that to be, okay, you know, TBD, to be determined. What Sachs did is actually solve the problem with the Einstein field equation, which is, you know, basically factorize them so that you get a number system that's compatible with quantum, and quantum can come out of the nonlinear field equations of the matter fields. So it's compatible with everything that we know now. You know, all the experiments. So you know, there was actually something like an advance to the science, advance to the physics, and there's physical reasoning for doing what you're doing. Whereas you look at something and you say, oh, we're reverse engineering it, and we have, you know, quantum field theory and general relativity, and we can play, you know, ping pong between them, two theories that are not compatible. We play ping pong between them, and we get some kind of a heuristic explanation. So that, you know, for me, it's not that, okay, you know, sure, it maybe that explains it. Okay, we can do stuff with that, but you know, what really advances us at the science. So if you guys see any of so I would often watch what's his name, Eric Weinstein. And so he has this, yeah, I've seen his videos when he talks about this UFO stuff, and I'm of the same opinion of you know, I've seen him make the point where, okay, you know, once we discover the neutron, boom, we had the atom bomb, right? You know, it was that discovery. So to me, okay, if these things are real, what's the physics discovery that we're having? Is it that we really live in a super nonlinear field theory universe, or is there some other concept that we don't know yet? Once we know that concept, there we are. So that's, to me, that's like my main interest, and what I'm keeping an eye on is something that fundamentally changes our understanding or drives our science forward, the physics forward, and then has all these consequences as, like, you know, effects. The technology is secondary to me. It's the physics. And I wonder why, you know, you talk about you know, the US Congress, you know, that they're probably like looking for people that explain it. They should be watching this conference, because there's convergence happening with a lot of these ideas, and that's not a happenstance. That's something that you see in technologies as they develop. You know, there's phenomena that happen, and there's some explanations, and finally somebody comes up with theory that you know, breaks through, and you get the application. So yeah.
Well, the rumor, I mean, the rumor is that whatever is being held, and again, I don't know, I feel old. I'm still having a hard time accepting all of that, but this whole idea of, okay, if there are UFOs in Area 51 or wherever they're keeping them, you know, the rumor is that they haven't figured them out, and that wouldn't surprise me. I mean, just imagine if somebody sat you down on a piece of technology like that and you couldn't talk to anybody, right? And you could take notes, but you had to leave them on the table. You can't take them home. And, you know, you get stuck on a problem, but you can't ask anybody, you know? I mean,
yeah,
who could solve that? You know? And we're not talking about, it's not like Lego blocks where you can take them apart. We're talking about, like, you know, God knows, 10,000, 100,000 years more advanced technology. It may be a living machine. It may use zero-point energy. It may not use circuits as we know them. Who even knows, you know? So I would imagine that if they ever do get this open and it looks like what the rumor mill says, they probably haven't made much progress at all.
Tim, if I could just riff on your thing for a quick sec here, as far as whether or not they've actually reverse engineered it or not, I hate when I don't have the reference available, but just this last week,
Radiance technology.
There was some whistleblower recently who mentioned that they've successfully done it enough to the point now where they can deliver a nuke anywhere on the planet in 2 minutes. I have a different source that suggests it's closer to 90 seconds, if not better.
I crunched some numbers on that too to get the top speeds and G-forces involved. They're stupid.
Well, the G-forces don't matter because they're reducing inertia somehow.
Yeah.
They're fucking up the Higgs field somehow. But all that aside, as far as like the success part,
perceived G-forces,
it's important to keep in mind the present state of disclosure, the rapid state of disclosure, and the potential successful results of this. It could be that they're trying to slowly say, hey, we have these weapons. We know our enemies have these weapons. This is the next Cold War that we've been in for who knows how long. And this is the state. We're all going to blow each other up, or we're going to make it through this. But these are the technologies that the world needs to know is about ready to kill us all.
Well, that's definitely the danger. That's kind of what I warned in my talk when I said this is dangerous stuff, because if you have something like that, then it can be weaponized very easily.
Any propulsion system is inversely proportional to its use as a weapon.
Yep.
And I think this brings us back to Pice a little bit in terms of like what the military knows about this. I think if English was his first language, I think he would do a much better job at projecting his own ideas into the environment. I don't mean to sound cocky, but I've gone very deep on his work over the last month, and I kind of had like one of those epiphany moments that Tim was talking about the other day, where I'm like, oh shit, I think I kind of see what's going on here. Excuse my French. And I don't think Pice has ever said it in any of his interviews, but he's talking about a warp drive. There's some papers where he kind of talks around it. I'll pull up the thing and pull up the quote here. Where is it? And one of his papers is the high frequency gravitationally wave induced propulsion, the paper, not the patent.
Well, and for stuff like that, you know, Gary Stephenson might be a great resource, because Gary studied, I mean, he worked with Bob Baker. He studied under Bob Baker. Bob Baker was the high frequency gravity wave guy. I mean, that was like his raison d'etre. So Daniel, do you have Gary's email? Do you want to send him an email?
No, I do not have his email.
Here, let me drop it in chat. And Gary is absolutely wonderful. Gary, he went to all those conferences also. And
I'll second that too. Gary and I have spoken on the phone several times, and he's all too excited to help you out and to collaborate. He's just totally open to great discussion. So that's a fantastic idea, Tim.
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, a lot of the folks from that era, right, they wanted to see this stuff move forward the same way everybody does. And so if they're able to help other people get there, you know, and really that's what it's all about. It's like, okay, you know, I mean, that's how I feel. It's like with my own lifter stuff that I was doing, I wasn't able to get there, but you know what? Maybe I can do something to help somebody else get there. That would be really cool.
All right, here's the quote. To generate their own gravitational fields in which the craft would propagate in a wave surfing fashion. That is the end of the abstract for this one paper of Pice that is lesser known. Still available, but not many people reference it.
Yeah. Actually, I just wanted to bring up this thing about G-force, etc., that you were talking of. I think a true field propulsion system should not feel any G-force. If you look at what is the Alcubierre drive,
the local space-time
the body
flat.
is literally stationary. Yeah. So you can go at any speed, really speaking, you know, like what Jared just now mentioned, right? 90 seconds. It shouldn't make any difference. That missile or whatever it is, or craft, whatever it is, it's just going to remain stationary anyway.
Right. Well, providing that you encompass the entirety of the volume for that mass inside of the active field gradient, then yes. But that also means that you're not having it focused in some kind of, you know, high energy density thruster at the end of it, or, you know, some kind of steering mechanism in the front.
Yeah.
I mean, no, I'm just talking of, theoretically, if we had such a field propulsion, I know the problems with Alcubierre drive, but you can't see in front, and there are particles and getting very high energy when you reach the destination, all of that. But I'm just saying, theoretically, if you had something like a real field propulsion system, you would not have the problem of G-force that we are used to now with conventional propulsion, right?
Well, and you wouldn't have a front end for these craft. And that's what we see with, right, the Tic Tac and these orbs and even flying saucers. Flying saucers are pancake shaped, presumably because they kind of land, but they don't have a front. And that, to me, that makes sense because, especially if you don't have G-force, right? Basically, you're in a cabin and you don't need a front because you don't need to turn the craft. It would waste energy to turn the craft. You just literally go what direction you want. Everything is the front.
Your fuel generating elements, though, they need to be the entire size of the craft, and that's the catch. Like, they can't be a small array of fuel generating elements that are inside of a box, say, mounted in the front. They've got to be the entire length and width of the craft in order to fully encompass that entire thing in the modified space-time field.
Yeah, so like the skin, right?
Right, exactly. The skin would be ideal.
I mean, this is a thing that I was just thinking some time back, right? We always talk about like what is it, a flying saucer, right? Which is kind of like a flattened pancake. So we should really have a spherical surface, which is symmetrical, in every possible axis, really speaking. That to me is a real spacecraft that can go, literally speaking, in any direction. But because the moment you have something flattened in one axis, then it's restricted against that axis, right? So I was just curious if anybody knows why this whole concept of this flattened pancake has ever come up. What is the technical reason why it has to be like that?
Simply, you create space-time compression along one of your three possible temporal axes, and then you pass the waves that you want to modify into gravitational shift along that same axis for control of the other two, and you cross them at an angle. So you're basically using one compressed axis to control your other two dynamically and modify whatever variable you're looking for, whether it be, stronger magnetic flux, stronger electric field potential, all being relativistically amplified by the geometry.
In the words of Eric Einstein, you're changing the protractors and rulers.
Right, so you can use modified space-time on one axis, though, to modify the other two, and that's the thing. We don't have to ignore it. It's not like limited to it.
Okay, but there's another, this would work, and to play the devil's advocate here, right? And this is one of the things that kind of worries me is, so the term flying saucer, this concept, as best I understand, came from Kenneth Arnold. And what it was Kenneth Arnold described that he saw basically crescent-shaped saucer shapes. And so those are almost more like flying wings. You could visualize it almost like a flying wing. The problem is when the media picked it up, it's really hard to describe that concisely. So they ended up with this flying saucer that ended in the popular vernacular, right?
Tim, actually what happened was he said those
they were skipping like correctly. A saucer.
They were skipping like a saucer, and then the media took that and said, "Oh, flying saucers."
So I don't
thought
know.
It's like, somebody was on the beach or something and they're throwing stones on the water, and so it became a flying saucer kind of thing, right?
Well, and I know during the 50s, definitely the 60s, the government played with those shapes, and that's how they ended up with kind of the flying wing. But in fact, I've read studies of that. They actually did aerodynamic studies of saucers, and they could not get them stable. They flopped around. So
the Avrocar.
But I mean, what Shrish was saying though is, like, again, the Mosul sphere for me is one example, and I think it has two advantages. I'm just putting it out there. One of them is it's a pressure vessel. It's an amazing pressure vessel. It's a sphere. It doesn't get better than that. And if you're going to operate in all sorts of environments, right, like water or maybe the atmosphere of Jupiter or whatever, you want something that can withstand high pressures. And then the other part is, there's no front, top, bottom, or sides. So maybe the difference is a saucer has to land, and so you don't want it round on the bottom, but those little orbs just
we could just have it cut off at the bottom.
I don't know, or something.
I mean, the reason I was asking, or just kind of throwing this out, was spherical and gravity have got a lot of deep connections. Like, look at the Schwarzschild metric; it is based on a spherical surface, etc. So so that's why I said, like, where did this flattened pancake come from? I don't even know which gravitational theory supports such a
Townsend
surface.
Brown is part of that too. He's somewhat responsible for that with his dielectric solid discs or whatever. Tim, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. No, I studied those closely, and that's another example of just media confusion, right? And
did you read Paul Shopskin's book recently?
Not recently.
Oh, so it's called The Man Who Mastered Gravity. He did like a biography piece on Brown. It's an interesting take. Is all I'll say without spoiling it.
I just want to mention too with Brown, if you're going to bring it up, have you ever heard of something called a lofting cake in Brown's work? Are you familiar?
No.
Okay, well, I'll just mention, at least for those curious, the lofting cake was the quintessential piece de resistance of Brown's work. It was a pancaked, compressed material made of isolated isotopes taken from benzonite clay, a select number of different materials, which included tantalum, in some cases for the opposite effect, tungsten and even tungsten carbide, and there's a whole list of them. You'll find them in his notebooks on the family website. But this lofting cake, it's called a lofting cake. And this thing goes directly in the center of the craft. You charge it up, and charge migrates into it, and it forms a monopolar electrolyte type mass. And then he slams it with a pulse from what he calls his exciter transformer. And suddenly the entire inertia for that whole craft and any other ionic forces that were being generated on it become that much stronger because the entire inertia is momentarily reduced. So you have an entire combined field effect where you both have a vectored force and you have an inertial mass reduction, and those two things together are exactly the last thing that he wrote down that was publicly available before he was pulled into isolation under military contract after showing that admiral. So
to me, that sounds, again, this goes back to what Mark is working on, right?
It's quite different than what Mark is working on. Mark is attempting to do this in solid materials, especially even in metals, which is fantastic, by aligning the nuclear spins of all the individual atoms, and then also trying to get them to do something extra, which is a little precession dance. So he makes them align. That's a momentary thing, whether it's paramagnetic, diamagnetic, or ferromagnetic, you can still get a momentary alignment as a traveling wave through the mass. And then secondly, if you can perturbate it from an angle, you can get that spin alignment to start to precess, and it generates what's called a spin wave. And that spin wave can have a very high energy density, and this would modify the inertial mass and the gravitational mass inversely of that material. So it's quite a bit different than what Brown did. The fantastic thing that I love about Brown's lofting cake is he found it in natural materials, and actually one example I've given publicly is Sahara sand will drift all the way over the ocean and land on United States coastlines, which is just nothing short of phenomenal, and you'll see it coming over as sort of a tannish fog. The fact that it can make it that incredible distance, and a lot of this heavy sand, like you can go scrape off piles of it from the rooftops, and there's pounds and pounds of sand that get deposited, and it's just phenomenal to think that it simply levitated, floated over the water, and it's certainly a lot more responsive than just what you'd expect from it being caught in the updraft of evaporation from the water's surface, and it seems to be directly responsive to photonic energy input, meaning that the desert sand actually lofts itself, a phenomenon that NASA writes about quite often, analyzing other planetary surfaces. The material lofts once it's photonically excited, losing all of its weight, and levitates over to wherever it finally decays and loses that photonic energy and re-radiates it. So there's some fantastic stuff in nature, and it's been teaching us the whole time. We just need to look.
Can I jump in here real quick?
Oh, yeah, all you.
Just 1 second to respond to what Jeremiah said. Actually, we're trying to orient subatomic particle spins. Orienting the entire atom, that's NMR. EPR is orienting the electron spins, and dynamic nuclear orientation is orienting subatomic particle spins.
Yeah, I should have said you're trying to align the nuclei.
So real quick, just on Trish's thing, also for the shape of the saucers, I would suggest you look into Lissajous curves, because those help to define the operating frequencies. Lissajous curves determine the shape of the flat pancake saucer thing. So I would recommend looking into that for the frequencies. Second thing, we have Kevin Day here with us from the Nimitz Tic Tac thing and the UAP X team, and he's got some stuff that I would love to hear what he has to say.
Hey guys, I was just waiting to jump in here because
Kevin, jump on in.
Change the subject just a little bit, because as you know, I'm not an engineer, not a physicist, but for some weird reason, I find myself here with a bunch of engineers and physicists. And
You're
I
a
got
pilot,
here today
right?
because Jack Sarfatti invited me in, and I got here, he was gone already. But anyway, you know how he rolls. So anyway, I it's my personal belief, and that's all it really is I think there's a physics that could answer a lot of questions here. And I think it's called intention, believe it or not. And how I arrived at this, back in 2004, after Commander Fravor and Fast Eagle flight had intercepted that Tic Tac object, we called it a thing, we didn't know what the hell it was. I had convinced the captain we needed to intercept it. I was very, very concerned about safety of flight. So he said, "Roger that, Senior Chief, intercept VID." The whole area said, "Woohoo!" So anyway, intercepted the closest one, got in the merged plot position, boom, dropped down to the surface of the ocean, did a, for all practical layman's terms, we did a dogfight, and bam, right in front of him, his words, disappeared, and went about 60 miles north to his flight's assigned cap station, which was very weird because in Strike Group Air Defense, we got, like, if this is going to be the threat and we're here, we got points in the sky all assigned to everyone that flies, so we're ready to rock if we have to. That object, whatever the hell it was, went exactly to Commander Fravor's assigned cap station, Combat Air Patrol Station. Not close, exactly on the latitude, longitude, and assigned altitude.
Is it true
And
that
I was,
sorry.
and I was thinking of, so I figured out later that was probably a message, and I figured it out on the rooftop down in Newport Beach when we did the UAP X mission down there. And lo and behold, guess who showed up for us? The Tic Tacs again. And after that was all over, Kevin Knuth, the PhD physicist out of New York University, Matthew Zydaugas. Matthew walks up to me and says, "Hey, Kevin, I got a question for you." So what's that, sir? He said, "Do you think intention itself has anything to do with this?" I was like, yeah, I was been thinking the same thing myself. Why do you? And he looked at me real funny, said, "Yeah," with his eyes. He didn't say it verbally, but I could tell he was thinking the same thing.
Well, but I mean, Kevin, if I could jump in, that's something,
Please
and again,
do.
with the
Please do.
interviews
Please
that I've
do.
done, every single person who gets into UFOs or UAP, every person that I interviewed, Gary Nolan actually made a joke about it, right? But every single one of them comes back to consciousness and intention. And Gary was joking. He's like, what does this have to do with it? And he said, "I don't know," but he's like, it seems like it does.
I can show you how, by using inference, it's at least 50% probable. And here it goes. Watch. The Big Bang, was it intentional? I don't know. I think, okay, so I'm going to assign it 50-50. I don't know. If you know it's 51-49, then please say so now and I'll stop. I'm going to say 50-50. Okay. Given the case it was intentional, did the intender, if I could use that word, survive it? Again, I don't know. So again, I'm going to assign it 50-50. Yes, it was intentional, and yes, the intender survived it. Okay.
Would you even say the intender was it?
Hold on, let me finish this. This is important. So I'm going with the thought that, using inference, yes, the Big Bang was intentional. Yes, the intender survived it. And now the question becomes, okay, if the intender of the Big Bang survived the Big Bang, in what form? As a benign form or as a force of some kind? Again, I don't know. I'm going to assign it 50-50 because I don't know. And if you know if it's 49-51, tell me. I'll stop it. I'll stop now. I don't know. So if it is a force, I kind of have to put it into the category of a fundamental force, right along with gravity, strong nuclear force, weak nuclear force, and electromagnetism. As a matter of fact, if I am correct on this, then intention itself is the grandmother of all the forces. Think about this, guys and gals, if you're listening. Think how powerful this idea, because if it's correct, it sure the hell solves it answers a lot of mail, doesn't it?
If you could get the
because if I could engineer actual objects based on intention, all these things like transmutability, all these unbelievable flight characters, the seeming magical abilities, the consciousness of these things. I got to tell you guys and gals, when Commander Fravor intercepted this thing, this object was extremely aware and conscious. It reacted to him just like it had a personality, and it was prescient. And I got to tell you something. You know, my entire job, I was a senior chief. My whole job, I'd been on 8 Western Pacific deployments, top of my game in air defense, assigned on 6 different warships over my career. And I got to tell you, my main job was to assess hostile intention and keep my aircraft safe. So when this was happening, did I feel any hostile intent? No. I find it hard to put into words the type of benevolence I felt. I was at total peace with this. As a matter of fact, I was scratching my head like, these things are here to see the whales. As bizarre as that sounds, because I was an avid whale watcher back in the day, and a lot of you guys and gals probably know the gray whales, they rendezvous out there in Catalina, and they all travel south to Guadalupe Island in Mexico, and they do that every year. Well, guess what these Tic Tacs were doing? You got it. They were coming from sub-Earth or low Earth orbit, dropping down to, and there was about 100 of these things over the course of November 10 to about November 16. They came down in groups of 5 to 10 at a time. They dropped down from sub-Earth orbit, or I'm sorry, a low Earth orbit, 80,000 feet. All of a sudden, as a group, they go down to 28,000 feet, right off the east coast of Catalina. And then, oddly enough, the one object would depart the bigger group, and very slowly, 100 knots, about 80 miles an hour or so, which was real slow at 28,000 feet. And you know where they all faded from all of the strike group radars? About 60 miles north of Guadalupe Island. And it was over the horizon, so I couldn't see where they were going, but it's my suspicion they were dropping straight into the water. And so when Lou Elizondo and Tom DeLong came to our house here, they interviewed me, and as soon as I told them this part of the story, Lou Elizondo jumps off the couch. He tells Tom, "We're going there." And they did. And you know what the fishermen told him? They said, "Yeah, we see them all the time. They fly down here and they drop out of the sky and they go straight down into the water. No splash, no nothing." Yeah, so I think the missing piece of this puzzle is intention, and I think my math kind of backs it up just using inference alone. I mean, show me point flaws in my logic. If they're, and sure, I could be wrong, and I accept that, but it's the best damn theory I've heard.
Kevin, I really enjoyed that. If I could pipe up something in favor of your intentional universe theory, there's the fine-tuning argument for the universe, where we got like 26 or 30 different fundamental constants of nature, and if any single one of them was changed by like an iota, the universe wouldn't work, right? It could be we live in a universe where it works because we live in a universe, and we wouldn't live in a universe if it didn't work, right? So universe might have tried many times and we might just be in one. But if there is only one universe, and that happened because all of these things were tuned just right, it points more, I think, in the favor of intention, but not by a great amount.
So let's devise some tabletop experiments to test the theory. Let's devise some tabletop experiments to test the theory that intention as a physics and see what happens.
Well,
can you measure?
That would be your global. That would be your global
double split.
Yeah, yeah, Mark, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, double split.
The double. Yeah.
Yeah,
What
double
about
split is
the?
good. Did you guys know that during the double split,
Mhm.
there's indications that when you observe the electron, apparently the electron also sees you back.
Not only that, it sees you back in the past too. Like it can time travel and know what you were thinking or thought.
Yeah,
And that's the Aronoff Bohm stuff that Jack was
Yeah,
talking about. And
yeah,
that's one of-
from
yeah.
the EP side of the equation. Yeah. with
Can I just follow up one other question for you, Kevin, and then I'll be done. We had someone else on here earlier who works with the Indian Air Force, and they're trying to be able to observe these things on radar. I suspect that it looks like birds on radar. Do you have any suggestions for what pilots should be looking on their radar to be able to see them, seeing as how you worked on the radar and saw these things on the radar?
I have a follow-up question on that before you answer. Is it
go
true
ahead.
that you guys tracked these things coming out of the ballistic radar defense systems before you picked them up on the ship radars?
That is very true. Because my focus as a tactical air defense watchstander is my main concern is 28,000 feet and below of BMD ballistic missile defense happens way up high in the sky. So a different team on the ship was watching way up there on the radar, and I was watching a lot lower. It's kind of the differentiation of duties, but we are very aware of what each other's doing, and that's how I found out about them initially. They gave me a heads up. Hey, we got these objects, and I mean it happened real quick too. We're talking a matter of just minutes. It wasn't like next day I found out. No. Anyway, go ahead and restate the question. The previous question.
I was asking how you would see on radar. Do you know what they look like on radar? If you want to tell a pilot, hey, this is what you might see on radar if you're seeing a UFO, but it's dark or you can't see with your eyes or something.
Yeah, bear in mind, I haven't been active for a long time now. And as advanced as it was then, if I walked on board a ship now, I'd probably scratch my head. Okay, just so
well, it's the Indian Air Force. Their tech probably isn't all up to date, maybe.
Yeah.
Do they have
back
radar?
Back in the day, we didn't. We could look at raw radar if we wanted to, but we very seldom did. It was mostly just for tuning and testing and looking at it out of curiosity. Sometimes even all of our videos returns are processed through the computers, and they're all assigned independent track numbers. That way, as in the case of the Tic Tac, when it disappeared and went 60 miles north, it maintained the same track number. That's one of the indications I knew that it was actually the same object. So oftentimes when we're looking at radar, we are actually looking at a symbol. So when I look up at a radar display, 2D display, I can instantly determine who's who in the zoo. Okay, this is an unknown, this is a friendly, this is a notional threat over here. And they all have track numbers. So when I talk on the radio or internally, we talk all a common language.
But if you see like a swarm, of them, right, and they're jumping around all over the place, that's going to look exactly the same, like static or noisy RF lines, or are you guys able to keep good solid track of like this individual?
That's actually that is an excellent question, because the first thing we did when we saw these anomalous contacts is all of our strike group ships and aircraft had received recent upgrades. So our initial thought was, okay, get the computer text up here, and we obviously have some sort of system malfunction, because this was extremely unusual, to put it lightly. So we stopped everything. We brought down all the systems on all the ships, and we brought everything back up, and guess what happened? The contacts were even better and stronger when we brought them back up. So yeah, at that point, I was gravely concerned. My main job again was air defense, safety of flight. And I had spent the better part of 3 months planning for this air defense exercise. It was my baby. I was working for the air defense commander. So I was the guy that designed it and briefed it and trained for it and all that stuff. And another really weird thing was, this was out of all that time, I had 18 and a half years sea time on ships. This was my very last time on board a ship. When the USS Princeton pulled into port in a week and a half or so, I was going to walk off the ship and go to work for the admiral over on the island. It was my last time I was ever on a ship in uniform. I did it for a little while when I was DOD and as a civilian. And was like their last shot they had at me. I know that sounds weird to say, but God damn it, I can't help but feel that way. I really can't. I mean, how do you explain this? And if you knew what happened to me post encounter, oh my God, it's an unbelievable story. Unbelievable. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, because if I don't know how many people here have ever encountered these things, but it's going to change you. It is going to change you. And when it does, my one piece of advice, or maybe I have two, is do not be afraid. If they wanted you dead, man, you'd be dead. We'd all be dead already. We would all be dead already. Not a damn thing we could do to stop it. And the other piece of advice I would give anyone was, when you start to change, it can change you in incredibly beautiful ways. All of a sudden you have new abilities you out of the blue, you never knew you had them. I'm telling you, you can play basketball. You're 39 years old. All of a sudden you can play basketball out of the blue. How? You can paint, or you have the ability to all of a sudden draw, play the piano, go on and on and on. You can suddenly learn languages like it ain't nothing, or physics or math. Somehow we get tuned up by these things. And there's theories, and I've done some research, and I've kind of worked a little bit with some of my contacts in the if I mention names, and I hate to do it, so I usually don't. But what I think is happening is, when you have this can happen from across the universe. The whole idea of locality in Einstein, that's out the window. Nope, it's a non-locality phenomenon. And what I think is happening, and this is just, I could be talking out my ass here, okay? Please understand that. I don't have the degree to say this, but I think it's vibrating an area in our brains, in the frontal lobe area of our brain, called the what the hell they call it? It's the basal. It'll come to me in a minute. It's a little tiny thing inside your frontal cortex. It has all the
basal ganglia.
Basal ganglia. Thank you very much. I would have remembered.
Yeah, I'm not trying to say too much.
It's your nerve. It's your nerve center for all. It's your nerve center for your entire body. And I think that baby's getting tuned up. And reality, these are not new abilities. They were just uncovered within you. They finally came to the surface. They were always in you. I know it sure the hell happened to me. I could have the floor for maybe 5 more minutes. I got all frustrated. No one would listen to me. Laughed at. To this day, I've got probably 80,000 emails I saved just in case. Cartoons, people giving me shit like you wouldn't believe. I got frustrated. I quit. Went back home. I was like, what the hell am I going to do? So I went back to college, got my master's degree, but I was bored. It was too damn easy, kind of disappointed with it. And so I started researching a family mining claim out here in the Kalmiopsis wilderness. And I was going to go out there and find some gold. And I was interested in geology anyway, so it just seemed like the right thing to do. And so I did. And boy, howdy, did I find it. Oh my God. I can't even believe what I found. My grandfather, when he was still living, rest in peace, he had told me, he was like, Kevin, you don't understand. It's a 100-year-old mining claim my family's had for 100 years. He said, Kevin, you don't understand. We lost more gold than we ever found. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, we weren't mining gold nuggets like in Takilma. The gold we were getting was so fine. When you looked at it through a microscope, it looked like little tiny snowflakes. And I'm like, I'm an amateur geologist, but far more now than I was then. I'm not a mineralogist or a mining engineer, none of that stuff. But it sure as hell seemed weird to me, because I was thinking, okay, if that little sucker had rolled, I'd be looking at a little tiny ball bearing, wouldn't I? Because it's so soft. So I figured out using inference, it had to be coming from close by. So that opened the door for me. So I started looking at the larger geology, and I've figured out that our little mining claim came from a much larger piece of geology. It's called the Josephine ophiolite. And for those that don't know, normally in this piece of ground is 157 million years old. It came from the Pacific spreading arcs, and an ophiolite is a section of ground. And you can imagine along the Pacific spreading arcs or any spreading arcs, you got hydrothermal vents laying down mineral deposits in a super heavy ground, way more heavy than granite and stuff on continental plates. So therefore, normally it subducts when they crash into each other, which is happening now with all the earthquake activity out here. But when it does get stuck on top of continental plates, it's called an ophiolite, and that's what we have. It's huge. It goes from Northern California, Northern Washington. It's 8 to 10 kilometers deep and goes I don't know how far inland. But I gave up because it's right in the wilderness and it could never be mined because it would tear the wilderness up, and I would defend that wilderness with my life. It's primordial. It's got plants and animals you can't believe. Absolutely stunning, beautiful. And then one thing led to another, and Elon Musk announced they're going to take the, the SpaceX launch around the dark side of the moon, come home on this. I'm not sure when it's happening now, but they were going to take 8 people with them. And I said, what the hell, I'll apply. And one of the requirements, you had to tell them why. So I did. I sent them my mining research. 68 pages of pretty detailed information. And guess what happened? 4 days later, I can send you the photograph of the airplane. I was out here working in the yard, and I look up, and there's this big, giant white aircraft flying, big, huge jet. It ain't supposed to happen, right over the top of the wilderness. Illegal. You can't fly over the top of the wilderness that low in a jet. And it started going north, south, east, west, east, all over the state, everywhere. And if you look on the map, I captured it with, actually a friend sent it to me of the flight radar tracker. And that airplane did DDoS right around the top of my mining claim. No, I'm no dummy, man. So let me figure this out. I just sent Musk my research, and all of a sudden I got the Navy flight flying, or the NASA flight flying around. Yeah, they're connected. Yeah, pretty sure. So there's serendipity here, because you know what happened? This is the beautiful part. And when I say I found much more than gold, this is what I'm talking about. When that aircraft went up north, they were using some sort of technology, and I'm sure still trying to figure out what the hell they were using. And again, I'm using inference, because right after that flight, they had announced that they found brand new hydrothermal vents off the coast of Seattle, Washington. They didn't know were there before. And guess what that means? Tsunami threat they didn't know was there before. Oh my God, isn't that beautiful? Think about it. I get emotional. Think about that. Wow, right? And that's just the start of it. You've only heard the tip of the iceberg. Yeah, if you encounter these things, pay attention. Go with it. You just might end up saving a whole hell of a lot of people.
Well, Kevin, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate your opening up so much.
You guys are the engineers, man. Figure this out. Like it was said earlier, if not us, who? And I include myself in that. And the reason why I do, money is going to be an issue here. Out of the blue, and I'm not going to mention names, but a major publisher got in touch with us, and they want to republish Sailor's Anthology. And they want to, but I've never taken money for this thing, because I'll lose this ability if I ever do. You have to have the integrity of a warrior to understand these quantum signals. That's what Jack told me. And apparently he thinks I have that. I don't know why, but he does. I don't take money for this. So my problem is, what the hell am I going to do with the money? And I'm going to write 3 more books. And I had this idea for marketing. And I want you guys' input on this. I had this idea because I want to turn it into a form of crowdsourcing to generate some money for research. That's what I'm gonna do with it. Take it one step further. So my idea is to everyone that wants to participate, when they buy the book on Amazon or wherever, $14.99 or wherever, hard copy, maybe a little more, their name goes into a database, and right before the rocket launches, the final file is sent to my buddy up in that spacecraft. And by the way, the space crew is going to do this already. We've been talking. They want to do it. They're going to turn it into a QR code, print it out on board, and pop it into the back of the Sailor's Anthology or whatever book they're taking. And guess what? If that book makes it back home, everyone that's in that database is going to be associated with the first damn published book in space. And not only that, you're going to 3D print it onto something hard and solid and punch it out into orbit. That way, in 2,700,000 years from now, it's found. Guess what happens to Curtis Horn's name? It's still there. He's associated with that object in space. And 2.7 million years from now, someone's going to be wondering about Curtis Horn. I think that's beautiful. Not only that, I think it'll sell one hell of a lot of books. I could be a shitty writer and still sell books, but fortunately I can write pretty good. So yeah, there's a couple projects that have already, and again, I'm not going to mention names because it's so premature and I don't want to do that. I can't. I haven't signed NDAs. It's just a matter of, I don't want to screw this up, okay? But yeah, the money is going to go to the right place, put it that way. I might take a little bit so I can pay my electric, keep writing, but that's about it.
Well, you know, I can't think. We're at 7:55 now, Kevin. I cannot think of a better thing to close down the conference on. Curtis does have his hand up. So what if we go to Curtis really quick and then close things down at 8? And I will do some editing to take some of the earlier confusion out of things.
Sounds
But
good,
Kevin,
Tim.
thank you again. And Curtis, what was it you had, sir?
Yeah,
My
so
pleasure.
earlier in the discussion, you know, what Kevin was saying about intention, it actually made me think of something I had heard Jack mention before about Hal Puthoff, which is something Hal Puthoff puts out there, which is remote viewing. And you know, like I said, I had seen the interview with Hal, or the discussion with Hal and Eric. And Eric, one of the points Eric made was, okay, you know, where's all the money you made if remote viewing is true, right? So, you know, in terms of, in the interest of kind of, you know, doing science, you know, all of us here that are like experimenting, we don't have funding, right? That's something that, you know, would be nice. So it's kind of like a, you know, maybe mini challenge I put out there as like, hey, if that's a real thing, and I can go and play the stock market and just make a little bit of money where I can keep doing the research, you know, that'd be great. I'm not opposed to doing that. So I can report back whatever someone wants to do. But if that's real, you know, maybe it's real. So let's do the experiment. But the other thing I wanted to bring up in terms of the science, there are a couple of science things that, you know, some of these science communicators have put out there. One was there's a particle accelerator that's about 10 centimeters long that they actually made electrons get up to about 10 giga-electron volts, which is really fast. And what's interesting, so if you look up Sabine Hossenfelder on YouTube, it was a couple of days ago. So she has a video, Move Over LHC. And one of the things interesting about it, I find, is that, you know, the theory does, you know, this experiment again is showing an effect where the theory is not there yet. So right now, you know, people are trying to scramble and figure out, okay, how did this plasma, you know, boost these electrons so quickly? They don't know. Now, the reason I bring this up is earlier in the discussion, we were talking about these, you know, using particle accelerators or, you know, fusion or fission type processes to, you know, push stuff. Well, a lot of times people are looking at those particle accelerators and they're thinking traditional particle accelerators. You wouldn't do that, right? You'd use one of these techniques, these plasma wave techniques that, you know, accelerate things really fast. And the other thing about this is that what they're using to do that, excite that plasma is a high petawatt laser, which then kind of points to this multi-photon Brett-Wheeler effect that could be happening. And there could be protons and it could be something that's tapping into the background pair, for all we know, the background pair gas. So that's a very interesting thing. The second interesting thing that came out recently had to do with the story of this experiment where they had some beryllium-10 atoms. So beryllium is normally, you know, has 4 protons, and its stable isotope is much less than 10. But anyway, so they had beryllium-10. So what they did is they took this beryllium-10 and they shot it against a target which had protons, basically solid hydrogen. And when they hit it with the beryllium-10, they were able to see what the scatter was and backtrack and find out what the nuclei was shaped like. And it turns out to be shaped like 2 helium atoms. Helium has 2 protons and 2 neutrons. And it was like a dumbbell shape, 2 helium atoms and 2 neutrons circling between them. So I thought that was a very interesting thing, that we're now discovering that some of these nuclei have more exotic shapes than what is predicted, right? No one predicted that. It's coming out of an experiment. And again, you're going to see people kind of back calculate and try to figure out, okay, how does a strong force explain this? Does it, right? So there is a lot going on, and I would keep that stuff in mind. You know, these physics experiments that are showing us, you know, in these extreme ways what matter really does.
I just got to poke a little fun at what you're talking about with a plasma LINAC. There's another variation of a LINAC that actually is much more well known. It's the short length microwave LINAC, high energy pulse magnetron, will drive these things for CT machines. And I can't mention the name of the company that I've seen the insides of these things for, but if you look at them from the cross section top down, these little less than 1.5 foot long acceleration area linear accelerators look exactly like the diagram straight out of Star Trek for the warp nacelles and the warp coils. I mean, it's like a spitting image. It's absolutely hilarious. And they're just simply using microwave compression and the change in epsilon and mu that directly modifies the refractive index to get super, super high energy densities in a short distance, so that they can put these LINACs on the end of a robotic arm and take what used to be a gigantic machine for treating people with pulse X-ray therapy for cancer treatment, now on something that can be stuck in a quarter of the size room robotic arm-wise. So it's awesome that they shrunk it down to that size, but I just love how when you try to get the energy density high enough to actually do something with space-time, it ends up looking like something right out of Star Trek. So something to look up if people are interested. Take a look at the microwave linear accelerators.
Yeah. Well, guys, on that note, why don't we close things down? It is Saturday, December 9th. This has been
on mute.
APEC.
Can we just give all our presenters today a round of applause for a tremendous impromptu presentation, and particularly this one for Tim Ventura for handling today's disruptions eloquently, respectfully.
Well, thank you, sir.
As no other moderator could do. So
thank you. Have a wonderful weekend, guys. We're only 2 weeks out from Christmas, so have a wonderful holiday season.
Thank you.
Happy Hanukkah.